LoveLore Library. Chapter 180. There was a highly toxic poison in front of them. Whether it was the concentration or the quantity, it was extremely large, but the detoxification system couldn't tell what kind of poison it was. There was no doubt that in front of them was the forbidden medicinal pool that Long Fei had mentioned. Long Fei covered his face and personally covered Han Yunxi's face as well. Holding her hand, they quietly dodged between the large rocks and gradually entered the heart of the forest. Soon, they saw a light in front of them. Long Fei held Han Yunxi's hand and hid behind a large rock. Han Yunxi carefully poked her head out to take a look and couldn't help but gasp. She saw that there really was an oval-shaped pool in front of them. The area wasn't large, only the size of 2 wells. There were all kinds of plants growing inside, and large patches of leaves poked out of the water like a lotus pond. Heavens, these were all poisons, newly cultivated poisons. No wonder her detoxification system almost exploded her ears. God knows how long that masked man had been planting poisons here. The pool was surrounded by lanterns, but there was no one in sight. "Where is he?" Han Yunxi whispered. Long Fei's attention was focused on the surrounding forest and didn't answer. He just casually pulled Han Yunxi's head back and pressed it down. Han Yunxi suddenly struggled, but who knew that at this time, a sharp voice suddenly came from the forest. "Who's there? They have a lot of people. Stay here and don't move," Long Fei said in a low voice. He let go of Han Yunxi's head and immediately soared into the air. Soon, there was the sound of weapons clashing in front of them. Han Yunxi was scared witless as she carefully poked her head out to take a look. When she saw the scene in front of her, she was immediately stunned. Heavens! There really were a lot of people. There were a total of 50 black-clothed assassins surrounding Long Fei. 1 against 50. What kind of joke was this? With such a number of people, they could squeeze Long Fei to death. However, Han Yunxi soon discovered that her worries were unnecessary. The black-clothed assassin couldn't get close to Long Fei. Long Fei, who was at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, had the upper hand in terms of speed. His swordsmanship couldn't be described as flowing clouds or flowing water. It was simply as fast as lightning. His moves couldn't be seen clearly at all. One could only see his sword rise and fall, and several black-clothed assassins fell one after another. Han Yunxi exclaimed in amazement. She was secretly glad that she did not become enemies with this man. Otherwise, she would not be able to sleep peacefully at night. His swordsmanship was simply heaven-defying. After a short while, the side of the medicinal pool was filled with dead and injured people. Out of the 50 black-clothed assassins, only a dozen were left. They retreated one after another, not daring to move forward. At this moment, 2 men walked out of the dark forest. One of them was a skinny old man dressed in green. He had a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks. One look and you could tell that he was a meticulous ghost. The other was tall and proud. He was dressed in black and wore a green mask with fangs on his face. Only his mouth was exposed. His gaze was so fierce that it was enough to make people ignore his terrifying mask and focus only on his eyes. "It's him, the masked man." He looked disdainfully at Long Fei and coldly said, "Useless things. This sovereign will give you one last chance. This sovereign wants to see his face." As soon as his voice fell, the dozen black-clothed assassins surrounded him again. This time, it was different from the previous time. Because this time, Han Yunxi's detoxification system gave off more than 10 alarms. They wanted to use poison. Moreover, the poison used by each black-clothed assassin was different. A few of the poisons were poisonous powders. As long as one breathed in, one would be poisoned. This masked man was too much of a bully. Han Yunxi was burning with anxiety. How could she warn Long Feiyi? This fellow's swordsmanship was powerful, but he didn't have any immunity to poison. As long as he wasn't careful, he would be poisoned. Han Yunxi was restless. She wanted to stand up a few times. However, Long Feiyi had long sensed that something was wrong. He held his sword with one hand and his other hand behind his back. He wasn't as relaxed as before. His eyes were filled with vigilance. Suddenly, 5 black-clothed assassins closed in on Long Feiyi. Long Feiyi's sword flashed and 5 lives were lost. He wanted to retreat in an instant. But who knew that these 5 people were actually human sandbags? When the 5 of them fell, the poisonous powder scattered around Long Feiyi's surroundings. Han Yunxi was about to shout. Fortunately, Long Feiyi wasn't someone easy to deal with. He immediately held his breath and retreated far away. At the same time, he suddenly raised his sword and swept it fiercely. In an instant, the sword flashed and the remaining black-clothed assassins were all sent flying into the dark forest. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Beautifully done. Han Yunxi couldn't take her eyes off Long Feiyi. Her heart was beating wildly. She admired Long Feiyi from the bottom of her heart. The Duke of Qin was indeed the Duke of Qin. He wasn't someone that ordinary people could imagine. The masked man clenched his fist so tightly that it made cracking sounds. He glared angrily at Long Feiyi and asked loudly, "Who exactly are you? And who are you?" Long Feiyi retorted. He raised his sword and pointed it at the masked man. "You don't have the ability to know." The masked man also drew his sword and pointed it at Long Feiyi. But who knew that drawing his sword was just a feint? At the same time, several poisonous needles flew out from the sword and headed straight for Long Feiyi. This time, Han Yunxi couldn't stay calm. She suddenly stood up and shouted, "Dodge! Once the poisonous powder comes into contact with the skin, you will be poisoned." This kind of poisonous powder was different from the one used by the black-clothed assassin. As long as one didn't inhale the poison powder used by the black-clothed assassin, one wouldn't be poisoned. But this kind of poisonous powder, once one came into contact with it, even if it was just a little bit, one would immediately feel weak all over and wouldn't be able to recover for at least 2 hours. If Long Feiyi was poisoned, then everything would be over. No one expected that Han Yunxi would suddenly stand up. Long Feiyi originally wanted to hit the poisonous needles, but after being reminded by Han Yunxi, he immediately dodged. His figure turned into a blur and he promptly left. The masked man was very shocked. He narrowed his eyes and coldly said, "Men, catch her." Han Yunxi was about to run towards Long Feiyi when a black-clothed assassin suddenly appeared behind her. Long Feiyi wanted to come over, but the masked man shot out another poisonous needle and blocked his path. "I want her alive," the masked man ordered coldly. He looked at Long Feiyi provocatively, but the poisonous needles in his hands didn't stop. Long Feiyi couldn't get close to him and could only hit him with his sword from afar. He couldn't get away for the time being, so he kept an eye on Han Yunxi's situation while shooting the poisonous needles. Han Yunxi looked at the approaching black-clothed assassin with fear and trepidation. She retreated step by step, and soon her back was pressed against a big rock. "Hee, big brother, please be magnanimous. Don't hit a woman." Han Yunxi forced a smile. The black-clothed assassin didn't answer her and stretched out his hand to grab her. Han Yunxi nimbly dodged to the right and turned to run. Helplessly, the black-clothed assassin grabbed her left shoulder. Just as she was about to struggle, the black-clothed assassin tightened his grip and she felt that her entire left shoulder was almost dislocated. Damn it! Han Yunxi was in so much pain that she sucked in a breath of cold air. She kicked towards the black-clothed assassin's lower body. The black-clothed assassin didn't expect this move of a woman's self-defense technique. He was forcefully kicked and it was so painful that he immediately let go. Han Yunxi took the opportunity to run away. But who knew that when the black-clothed assassin fell, two more black-clothed assassins chased after him, one from the front and one from the back, trying to grab her. Han Yunxi dodged again and again, gasping for breath. Her hands and feet were very nimble and she also had some superficial skills. But how could she be a match for professional assassins? If it wasn't for the masked man saying to keep her alive, the black-clothed assassins would have drawn their swords and killed her, right? Once again, she was forced to the side of the big rock and gradually had no way to retreat. Suddenly, a black-clothed assassin stretched out his hand and wanted to pull off her mask. Damn it, Long Fei Yi brought her here to help, not to be a burden and even more not to expose her identity. Wait a minute, she was here to help. Han Yunxi seemed to have suddenly thought of something. She quivered and immediately took the initiative. She suddenly stretched out her hand and fiercely slapped the black-clothed assassin's hand. Ah! The black-clothed assassin screamed and looked at Han Yunxi in shock. What are you looking at? He's poisoned. Han Yunxi kicked over and directly kicked the black-clothed assassin down. The black-clothed assassin fainted on the spot and a poisonous needle pierced into the back of his hand. Han Yunxi's heart ached when she saw this. She was too agitated just now and accidentally wasted a lot of poisonous needles. Actually, 2 or 3 needles could have been taken care of. The other black-clothed assassin looked at his companion in disbelief. Taking this opportunity, Han Yunxi waved her small hand and scattered the poisonous pollen. The black-clothed assassin wanted to dodge, but it was already too late. Once the poisonous pollen touched him, his limbs immediately weakened and he fell to the ground. She stepped on the powerless black-clothed assassin and coldly said, "Are you the only ones who know how to use poison? I'll give you your master's poison." Although Madame Li's words had hurt her greatly, she was right. Those who were good at detoxification were the ones who knew how to use poison. How could Han Yunxi always forget that she knew how to use poison? Alright, although using poison went against a doctor's principle, she was going all out tonight. She was here to help Long Fei Yi. After dealing with the 2 black-clothed assassins, Han Yunxi did not dare to delay and rushed towards Long Fei Yi. However, very quickly, a group of black-clothed assassins came and surrounded her. After witnessing Han Yunxi's poison, this group of black-clothed assassins did not dare to underestimate her and all of them took out their long swords. Han Yunxi's face turned pale. At this very moment, she really wished that she could be like the masked man, who was skilled in using concealed weapons and could kill with a wave of his hand. She knew how to use poison, and she knew all kinds of poisons. However, the way she used poison was completely child's play. Other than injecting needles and spraying poison, she did not know how to do anything else. Under the illumination of the lights, the blades of the swords shone so brightly that it almost blinded Han Yunxi's eyes. Very quickly, a long sword was placed on her neck from behind. Han Yunxi wanted to cry. In the end, she was still a burden. However, who knew that at this moment, several sharp swords would suddenly attack from the side. The momentum was like a rainbow and could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. Not to mention Han Yunxi, even the surrounding black-clothed assassins were intimidated and momentarily forgot to move. Suddenly, there was a crisp sound and the long sword on Han Yunxi's back was instantly broken by the swords. At the same time, the black-clothed assassins were also hit by the swords. Only Han Yunxi stood at her original position, unharmed. Han Yunxi was in disbelief and subconsciously wanted to look back. She saw Long Fei Yi standing not far from her with a sword in his hand and looking at her. His arm had been hit by 3 poisonous needles. He was poisoned. Because he wanted to protect her, he couldn't dodge the poisonous needles. After being poisoned by the poisonous pollen, one's entire body would become weak very quickly. But why didn't she detect any signs of poisoning on this fellow's body? At this moment, the masked man was also looking at Han Yunxi. The three of them were in a deadlock. Everyone wanted to move, but no one moved. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Ye's legs suddenly went soft and he fell down on one knee. Seeing this, Han Yunxi was even more puzzled. They were not far away and she was completely sure that Long Fei Ye wasn't poisoned. Presumably, the poisonous needles on his arm didn't really pierce into his skin and the poisonous powder didn't directly touch his skin. Although she was shocked, Han Yunxi kept the shock in her heart. She didn't show it and pretended to be anxious as she ran towards Long Fei Yi. However, the masked man said faintly, "Stop right there." Chapter 181. Did she have to stop just because he told her to? Han Yunxi didn't care and continued to move forward. However, the masked man instantly closed in on her and didn't allow her to escape. He pressed down on her shoulder with one hand and ruthlessly tore off her mask with the other. Once he saw Han Yunxi's clean little face, the masked man laughed. "You can smell the poison of the pollen from such a distance." With such great ability, this senior was still wondering who it was. "So it's really you. Let go of me." Han Yunxi struggled and grabbed his arm. The masked man was in an extremely good mood and let her grab him. "Since Qin Wangfei has come, then this must be." As the masked man spoke, he turned around to look at Long Fei Yi. However, who knew that at this moment, an ice-cold sword was suddenly pressed against his neck. It's Long Fei Yi. He could actually still stand up. Could it be that he wasn't poisoned? How could it be? The masked man didn't expect this. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi had already seen that Long Fei Yi wasn't poisoned. Her reaction was extremely fast. Taking advantage of the masked man's moment of distraction, she suddenly reached out and tore off his green face-fanged mask. Her body nimbly struggled and in an instant, she retreated far away. Han Yunxi was extremely nervous. However, she saw that under the mask, there was actually a shockingly handsome face. The contours of his facial features were deep as if they were deliberately carved by the heavens. He emitted a wild, arrogant, and insufferably arrogant aura of a king. On the corner of his right eyebrow, there was a blood-red eyebrow nail. Under the cover of his fine bangs, she couldn't see what kind of totem it was. It was mysterious and full of wildness. He didn't need to do anything. Just this face alone was enough to make people tremble in fear. Han Yunxi's heart was already beating wildly. Because of this face, it unconsciously sped up. The masked man didn't care about Long Fei Ye's sword on his shoulder. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Han Yunxi coldly. Han Yunxi tightly grasped the green face-fanged mask. She only felt a murderous aura rise and subconsciously took 2 steps back. Han Yunxi, very good. The masked man's voice was full of threat. He actually ignored the threat behind Long Fei Yi. Although Han Yunxi was timid, she hated this kind of threat. Unwilling to be outdone, she retorted, "If you can't even tell that he's not poisoned, you might as well quit the poison world as soon as possible." The masked man clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. At this time, Long Fei Ye's sharp sword was pressed against his neck as he slowly circled to the front. Just as Long Fei Yi was about to see the masked man's face, a white fog suddenly emerged from the masked man's body. "Be careful of poison." Han Yunxi cried out in alarm. Long Fei Yi immediately dodged and landed beside Han Yunxi to protect her. However, in the blink of an eye, the masked man had already disappeared, leaving behind a large patch of dark red blood on Long Fei Yi's blade. Long Fei Yi had injured him quite badly, but in the end, he still managed to escape. Han Yunshi heaved a huge sigh of relief. That was a close call. If it wasn't for Long Fei Ye's fake poisoning and her quick reaction, she probably would have been a burden tonight. Do you remember his face? Long Fei Yi immediately asked. Of course, she would remember such a shocking face. He has an eyebrow nail at the corner of his right eye. It's blood red, like a totem. Han Yunshi quickly replied. Such a special eyebrow nail must be something very rare. Sure enough, once she said this, Long Fei Yi sneered, so it's him. Who? Is he from Northern Li? Han Yunshi was very curious. Northern Li's Kong Wang, Jun Yi Xia. Long Fei Yi said word by word. In the Three Kingdoms, only Jun Yi Xia was someone he would take seriously. Unexpectedly, it really was him. Jun Yi Xia. Han Yunshi was unfamiliar with this name, but she knew of Northern Li's Kong Wang. Northern Li's Kong Wang, Tianning's Duke of Qin, and Western Zhou's Crown Prince Yi. These three titles resounded throughout the Three Kingdoms of Cloud Realm continent. Everyone knew that the Kong Wang was domineering, the Qin Wang was cold, and Crown Prince Yi was ruthless. Han Yunshi had long met Crown Prince Yi of Western Zhou, Duanmu Bei, who was Princess Rongla's older brother, so she didn't think much of it. However, this Kong Wang, leaving aside his poison skills, had an evil and tyrannical aura about him that left a deep impression on her. Unlike Long Fei Yi and Crown Prince Yi, Northern Li's Kong Wang wasn't a member of the imperial family, but the adopted son of the Northern Li Emperor. However, his status far exceeded that of any other prince. He was a person who could cover the sky with one hand and turn over the rain with a flip of his hand. Although they hadn't caught the culprit, this trip hadn't been in vain. Now that they knew who the culprit was, at least they wouldn't be caught off guard. The truth of the matter of the poison trader had also come to light. Seeing Long Fei Ye's icy gaze, Han Yunshi thought to herself, Long Fei Yi definitely won't let this matter rest so easily. Long Fei Yi wiped away the bloodstains on his sword and sheathed it. He was about to pull out the poison needle from his arm when Han Yunshi hurriedly stopped him. Don't move, I'll do it. She took out a handkerchief and carefully wrapped it around the needle before slowly pulling it out. The poison on the needle was made of poisonous pollen. If one wasn't careful, they'd be poisoned. Han Yunshi discovered the truth as soon as she pulled out the needle. Long Fei Ye's sleeves were covered with leather armor, so the poison needle had only pierced the armor and not him. Feigning poison, you're really smart. Han Yunshi had to praise Long Fei Yi. Actually, if it weren't for the detoxification system, she wouldn't have been able to tell at all. Thinking of this, Han Yunshi suddenly burst into laughter. What are you laughing at? Long Fei Yi asked. Majesty Kong must be racking his brains and still won't understand how I knew that you weren't poisoned. Han Yunshi was laughing, but Long Fei Yi unexpectedly said, he'll still look for you. As soon as he said this, Han Yunshi's laughter stopped abruptly. Majesty Kang's dangerous eyes appeared in the back of her mind, and she immediately felt a chill run down her spine. Alright, as the main culprit who tore off his mask, she was indeed very dangerous. Seeing Han Yunshi's deathly pale face, Long Fei Yi asked with interest, scared? Han Yunshi immediately put on a pious expression, her gaze burning as she looked at him with a pitiful look. With your highness here, Qinxia is not afraid of anything. Actually, her pitiful look was just an act. Was she trying to suck up to him? Long Fei Yi, who had always hated women who put on airs and pretended to be pitiful, actually didn't hate it. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't say anything. He avoided her gaze and walked towards the poison pool. Alright, Han Yunshi had long been used to this cold-faced fellow who was unmoved by force or persuasion. She resentfully shrugged her shoulders and followed him. In any case, she and Long Fei Yi were in the same boat. If she was kidnapped again, Long Fei Yi wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. This should be considered a type of fearlessness, right? The poison pool wasn't very big, and the water was very shallow, but the pool was filled with poisonous herbs. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi both frowned, their faces full of worry. The one in front of them was the biggest problem. Previously, when they were far away, the warning from the detoxification system was very loud. It could only mean that there was a high concentration of poison here, and it covered a large area. However, Han Yunxi still had to do a detailed scan to analyze the specific situation. Although she didn't know what kind of poison it was, the detoxification system could still differentiate which ones were poisonous and how deep the poison was. The results of this analysis shocked Han Yunxi. There's an unknown poison in the pool water. The toxicity of these plants is still very, very weak. It's not enough to poison people, she said lightly. Although he knew that Han Yunxi's poison skills were very powerful, Long Fei Yi still couldn't help but be curious after hearing what she said. How did you know? I smelled it. My nose is very sensitive to poison. Han Yunxi smiled. Even she herself felt that this reason was extremely ridiculous, but no one could doubt her words. A trace of suspicion flashed past Long Fei Yi's eyes, but he didn't pursue the matter. So, the Sanfua Majesty still doesn't have any new varieties? I don't think so. These plants are still quite some time away from being fully grown. Han Yunxi was very glad that she had discovered it early. The detoxification system had warned her that the pool water was highly poisonous, and the toxicity of these plants was very low. They were basically still in the early stages of being fully grown. In detail, these plants were all non-poisonous medicinal herbs. When they were planted in the poisonous water, the toxicity and medicinal properties were reacting, and a new type of toxicity was gradually emerging. Although the toxicity of the poisonous water was the same, the medicinal properties of each medicinal herb were different. Therefore, the toxicity of the plants would be different in the end. Although she had discovered it in time, Han Yunxi still couldn't help but shiver when she looked at this pool of hydroponically grown poisonous medicinal herbs. The poisonous medicinal herbs in this pool were all different. If they were fully grown one day, then how many new varieties of poison would there be? In her fear, Han Yunxi plucked a medicinal herb and looked at it thoughtfully. If a new variety fell into the hands of others, that would be a terrifying thing. But what if it fell into her hands? Then the terror would belong to others. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi's quick-witted and crafty eyes gradually lit up. She knew how to deal with this big trouble. As long as it was a poison that had been recorded in her detoxification system, no matter if the detoxification system had the medicinal herbs or not, it would be able to distinguish it and provide the prescription for the antidote. If it wasn't recorded, then there would be no solution. However, she remembered that the detoxification system still had a function that hadn't been fully developed. That was intelligent analysis. Given enough raw materials for poison, the detoxification system could automatically analyze the various attributes of the raw materials and formulate new poisons. One had to know that the pool water in front of her and the medicinal herbs that had yet to mature were all considered as raw materials for poison. Looking at the pool filled with emerald green, Han Yunxi's lips secretly curled into a sneer. These raw materials, she must have them. Although the quantity was a little large, but with the unlimited space of her detoxification system, she could still eat them. It was just that it would consume a lot of her brain power. Han Yunxi secretly glanced at Long Fei Yi. Who knew that Long Fei Yi also happened to look over? Is there a way to destroy the poison in the pool water? Long Fei Yi asked seriously. 4 words immediately appeared in Han Yunxi's mind. What a waste of God's gift. She pondered how to take the pool for herself without arousing Long Fei Yi's suspicions. Who knew that at this moment, a stern voice would ring out, who is so bold to dare trespass into Medicine City's forbidden area? Do you want to become enemies with the entire Medicine City? The guards of the forbidden area had finally arrived. Han Yunxi immediately covered her face and sneered in her heart. The Sanfewa Duke had colluded with the Mu family. Now that the Sanfewa Duke had left, the Mu family naturally wanted to lure the guards over. She quickly covered her face and quickly saw a large group of guards emerge from the surrounding forest. The two people at the front were the skinny old man who had been standing with the Sanfewa Duke earlier. "Let's go." Long Fei pulled Han Yunxi and was about to retreat. The poison pool in the forbidden area was shared by the three great clans of Medicine City. It was inconvenient for him to publicly interfere with the matters of the three clans. He also didn't want to publicly become enemies with Medicine City. Right now, he could only leave first. But who knew that as Long Fei grabbed Han Yunxi and was about to escape, countless arrows flew out from all directions. Although the forbidden area was heavily guarded, there shouldn't be so many archers. They were clearly aiming for an expert like Long Fei. Otherwise, why would there be so many archers in the forest? Damn it, this must be the Sanfewa Duke's instigation. Note to the readers, the identity of the black-clothed men has been revealed. To see the Sanfewa Duke Jun Xie's illustration, please follow Jean Mo's public WeChat account, Jimomo 2015. Reply, Sanfewa Duke, and you will see it. Chapter 182. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Streaks of sharp arrows flew over from all directions like a torrential rain. Long Fei hugged Han Yunxi tightly in his arms as his figure dodged the rain of arrows like a shadow. It wasn't easy to escape in such a short period of time, but it wasn't that easy to injure Long Fei with just the encirclement of sharp arrows. If it was in the past, Han Yunxi would definitely be afraid, but after witnessing this fellow's valiance, Han Yunxi had long relaxed her heart. She carefully poked her head out from Long Fei's arms and sneakily looked at the poison pool below. Very quickly, she concentrated and entered a state of mind. Under a state of high concentration, she could retrieve poison from the detoxification system. Similarly, she could also store poison into the detoxification system. Just that storing it required more effort than retrieving it. Once Han Yunxi entered a state of mind, she gradually forgot about the surrounding dangers and allowed Long Fei to dodge and defend against the sharp arrows. She devoted all her attention to the poison pool. In the end, she couldn't even hear what was happening around her. In her eyes, the only thing left in the world was the poison pool below. The rain of arrows gradually became sparse and Long Fei took the opportunity to escape. However, at this moment, a shocked cry came from below. The poison pool has disappeared. It's gone. Long Fei turned sideways to dodge the sharp arrows and looked down. He was shocked to see that the forbidden poison pool, which was originally filled with poisonous herbs, was now empty. Not only that, even the water in the poison pool had disappeared. This. Below, that lean old man and the rest were all stunned. Long Fei was also extremely shocked. But he only took one look and didn't stay for long before he left. Not knowing how long that bunch of guards were shocked, Long Fei still couldn't believe what he had seen with his own eyes after he left the medicinal herb forest. "Did you see the poison pool?" As he asked, he was about to let go of Han Yunxi, but who knew that at this moment, he realized that Han Yunxi had fainted in his arms. When did she faint? Fainted from fright. This woman shouldn't be so weak, right? Long Fei was bewildered. Worry flashed through his eyes, and he immediately brought Han Yunxi back to the Wang family. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi didn't wake up from her coma. Wang Gong sought out all the doctors in Medicine City, but no one could diagnose what was wrong with Han Yunxi. There was no illness, pain, or injury, and his pulse was normal. He was just a little tired, but he shouldn't have been unconscious for so many days. As for being poisoned, Long Fei did not believe that this woman would be poisoned and not wake up. In the past few days, the 3 clans of Alchemy City held several secret meetings to discuss the matter of the forbidden poison pond in the medicine forest. Long Fei wasn't mistaken that night. The poisonous herbs and water in the pond had indeed disappeared into thin air. Wang Gong went there personally and saw that the poison pool was empty. Duke of Qin, this matter is truly strange. Wang Gong stroked his beard and sighed. Since the Mu family had colluded with the Sanhua king, they must have known that Long Fei and Han Yunxi had barged into the forbidden area. Wang Gong didn't expose the fact that the Mu family had colluded with the Sanhua king to use the poison pond, and the Mu family didn't know about the relationship between Long Fei and Wang Gong. They only said that there were 2 masked men who had barged in that night. As for their identities, they didn't disclose it. The 3 clans increased the security of the medicine forest. As for the matter of the forbidden pond, they said they would investigate it together. However, they didn't have a single clue. Who knew what they would find in the end? It's good that it disappeared, so this prince won't have to waste the effort to destroy it. The forbidden poison pond was Medicine City's most precious treasure, but Long Fei didn't hold back in front of Wang Gong. Wang Gong knew the gravity of the situation. If the poison pond really fell into the hands of the Sanhua king, then one day, not to mention the Wang family, even Medicine City might not be safe. Wang Gong nodded in agreement. There's something fishy about this matter. I'm afraid we'll have to send more people and keep a close eye on it to prevent any more unforeseen events, Long Fei said seriously. Wang Gong nodded in understanding. The forbidden poison pond had always been full of mystery. Now that it had disappeared into thin air, who knew when it would appear again? It definitely couldn't be underestimated. Just as they were talking, a servant girl's surprised voice suddenly rang out from inside the room. Your Highness Duke of Qin, Your Highness Duke of Qin, esteemed Wang Fei is awake. She's awake. Long Fei was overjoyed. He immediately stood up and left. He was usually calm and collected, but this time, his surprise was written all over his face. Wang Gong couldn't believe his eyes as he watched that hurried figure leave. In fact, it was already surprising that someone as cold as the Duke of Qin could bring Qin Wang Fei out. In the inner room, Han Yunxi had just opened her eyes. Her head was still dizzy and her limbs were weak. She felt like she was about to collapse. She knew that she had to sleep for a long time, but she didn't know how long she had slept. What was this place? Just as she was about to ask the servant girl beside her, a familiar voice rang out. It was cold and domineering as usual, but there was a trace of pleasant surprise in it that anyone could hear. Han Yunxi, you're finally awake. Unfortunately, the dizzy Han Yunxi didn't hear it. Soon, Long Fei's handsome face that angered both men and gods appeared in front of her. Han Yunxi grinned and smiled with a pale face. Your Highness, we've escaped. Long Fei had just rushed over like an arrow, but when he arrived, he suddenly felt at a loss as he stood by the bed and looked at Han Yunxi. He only faintly replied with an N and sat down on the edge of the bed. The servant girl immediately poured warm water and respectfully handed it to Long Fei. Long Fei casually took it, but after taking it, he didn't know what to do. Your Highness, Wang Fei hasn't had a drop of water for the past few days. She needs to drink some warm water before eating. This servant will go and bring some millet porridge over. The servant girl hurriedly retreated as she spoke. Feed her water, Long Fei didn't reply, but he quickly helped Han Yunxi up so that she was leaning against his arm. Then he held the water to her lips. His movements were very unfamiliar, as if it was his first time serving a patient like this. However, his arms were very strong and steady. Han Yunxi was still dizzy. After sleeping for so many days, she was thirsty and hungry. When she saw the warm water, her heart burned with anxiety. She immediately gulped it down, but after a few mouthfuls, she choked. Pft, cough cough. With this choking and spitting, she immediately spat out a mouthful of saliva onto Long Feiye's hand. Seeing this, Han Yunxi immediately shut her mouth. She was instantly clear-headed. Although her throat hurt so much that she wanted to cough, she still made muffled sounds. Her face was deathly pale. One had to know that the Most Honorable His Highness Duke of Qin had mysophobia. And it was a serious case of mysophobia. Unexpectedly, Long Feiye put down the cup and hurriedly had Han Yunxi lower her head. He patted Han Yunxi's back and said unhappily, "Cough hard. Why are you holding it in? Do you want to die?" Didn't he dislike it? Han Yunxi couldn't hold it in and coughed heavily. After coughing for a long time, she finally coughed out the water stuck in her throat. Once her breathing was smooth, she had no more strength. She collapsed in Long Feiye's arms. She was extremely weak. She looked at Long Feiye like a child who had done something wrong. She looked at him timidly and was about to apologize, but Long Feiye had her lean against the pillow and went to wash his hands. Han Yunxi swallowed the words of apology that were about to come out of her mouth. She silently looked at Long Feiye. She couldn't see his face, only his cold profile. His brows were slightly furrowed, as if he was a little disgusted. He washed for a long time and was very serious. Actually, it was good enough that he didn't push her away on the spot. However, she didn't know why, but looking at Long Feiye so focused on washing his hands, Han Yunxi felt an indescribable sense of loss. After wiping his hands clean and looking at his well-maintained hands, a complicated look flitted across Long Feiye's eyes. He poured another cup of water and asked Han Yunxi, "Drink some more." Han Yunxi shook her head. She didn't want to drink for the time being. "Drink some more." As Long Feiye spoke, he was about to pass the cup to her, but Han Yunxi instinctively reached out to take it. Both of them paused. Very quickly, Long Feiye passed the cup to Han Yunxi and said mildly, "No one's going to snatch it from you. Drink slowly." "Oh." Han Yunxi responded and lowered her head to drink the water. Both of them were silent. After a long time, Han Yunxi spoke up. "Just now. I dirted you. I'm sorry." Long Feiye responded with a faint mm and didn't say anything else. However, Han Yunxi felt annoyed for no reason. Even she didn't understand why. She had always been decisive, straightforward, and carefree. Why did she always feel like she couldn't let go in front of this man? Was it because she had expectations and thoughts that she shouldn't have? Just then, Long Feiye asked, "You were unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. What happened? Did you faint from fright?" With the change of topic, Han Yunxi felt much more at ease. She looked up and pretended to be shocked. 3 days and 3 nights. What happened? Why did you faint? Long Feiye asked again. "I don't know either. I didn't dare to look up when I saw so many sharp arrows. I don't know why, but I felt a little uncomfortable breathing. After that, I don't remember what happened." Han Yunxi was especially serious. In other words, he was hugging her too tightly and she fainted from suffocation. Long Feiye stared straight at Han Yunxi. "That's it. Goodness, this guy wasn't so easy to fool." Han Yunxi stuttered. Actually, when this concubine was suffocating, this concubine pushed Your Highness a few times. But Your Highness was busy dodging those sharp arrows and didn't notice. Your Highness's grip was too strong, so this concubine couldn't break free." There wasn't any other meaning behind her words. She was saying that he was hugging her too tightly. Hearing this, Long Fei Ye's gaze wasn't as wanton as before. Han Yunxi snickered inwardly. Was this considered taking liberties with the Duke of Qin? She wouldn't admit it even if she was beaten to death. She wasn't that daring. She struck while the iron was hot and said, "Your Highness, did this concubine really faint for 3 days and 3 nights? This concubine couldn't have contracted some strange illness, right? What did the doctor say?" "Rest first. I'll have the doctor come take a look at you later." Long Fei finally withdrew his scrutinizing gaze. "Your Highness, then the matter of the Forbidden Area's poison pool, how should we deal with it?" Han Yunxi probed. Long Fei told her about the strange matter and the 3 great patrician families' arrangements. "It's so strange. How could it be like this?" Han Yunxi was inconceivable. She was very excited, but a trace of craftiness flashed through her eyes. She was probably the only one in the entire world who knew why it was like this. Your pool was strange in the first place. The 3 great patrician families couldn't explain it either. However, it's still a good thing that it's disappeared, Long Fei said indifferently. If the pool water and poisonous herbs hadn't disappeared into thin air, he also wouldn't have known how to deal with them. After all, they were Medicine City's most precious treasures. Destroying them wasn't easy. Han Yunxi nodded her head like she was pounding onions. She had done it without anyone noticing. No matter how capable the 3 great patrician families were, they definitely wouldn't be able to find the poison pool. Moreover, it was impossible for the pool to produce water again. She wondered how His Highness, the Duke of Kong, would react when he found out that the new species he had painstakingly cultivated had been uprooted and pocketed by her. She narrowed her eyes slightly and pretended to rest. In reality, her divine sense had secretly slipped into the detoxification system. Only when she saw that the poison pool water and poisonous herbs were all hidden inside did she relax. Her trip to Medicine City this time really wasn't in vain. She didn't have enough energy to try to activate the detoxification system's program to analyze the poison water and poisonous herbs. However, since it was all in her bag, she wasn't in a hurry. Han Yunxi didn't know how much of a surprise the poison water and poisonous herbs had brought her. Of course, this was a story for another time. After resting for a day, Long Fei and Han Yunxi finally returned to the inn. At this time, Gu had been looking for them until he was almost in despair. Chapter 183. Long Fei and Han Yunxi had disappeared for 6 nights straight. Gu had searched the entire Medicine City for clues, but found nothing. Just as he was about to deny Long Fei's reputation, Long Fei and Han Yunxi finally showed up. The 2 of them entered the guest room and were about to close the door when Gu appeared out of thin air. He blocked the door with a hand and narrowed his bewitching eyes, a cold smile on his face. His entire being emanated a cold, dangerous aura. Han Yunxi shrugged her shoulders and openly opened the door to invite him in. Gu didn't blame her for anything, but gave her a brilliant smile. Han Yunxi's lips twitched into a fake smile. Gu looked towards Long Fei with a mocking smile. Your Highness Duke of Qin's search for information took 6 days. I'm sure you found out quite a few secrets. Long Fei ignored him and sat down to brew tea. He even poured a cup for Han Yunxi and gestured for her to sit down. Han Yunxi was about to go over when Gu snatched her spot. He casually picked up the teacup and drained it in one gulp. I heard that the plague in Tianning's capital city is more or less under control. Your Highness Duke of Qin still hasn't fulfilled your promise, so this young master is going to start calculating interest. Long Fei sat high and lofty without a word. He didn't even spare Gu a glance. Now Gu fell silent as well. Gradually, the smile in his eyes faded away to be replaced by a dangerous aura. In the silent room, the atmosphere grew more and more off. Han Yunxi watched from the sidelines, not daring to make a sound. Long Feiyi wasn't someone who didn't keep his promises, but Han Yunxi was puzzled as to why he was ignoring them. Finally, Gu slowly rose to his feet, his eyes flashing with killing intent. But it was at this moment that Chu Shifeng entered. "Your Highness, here's the thing you wanted." She saw Long Feiyi holding a rectangular brocade box in his hands. It was obvious at a glance that it contained hidden treasures. Han Yunxi scooted over suspiciously and sat down by Long Feiyi's side. "Open it and let him inspect the goods." Long Feiyi finally opened his mouth. Inspect the goods. Could it be that this was? Han Yunxi couldn't believe it. Gu narrowed his eyes and stared at the brocade box with suspicion. Chu Shifeng placed the brocade box on the table and slowly opened it. Inside, he saw that there really was a medicinal tea tree sapling hidden within. Its roots were still stained with soil, and its branches and leaves were covered in fresh green buds. This is the medicinal tea tree sapling. Han Yunxi was pleasantly surprised. She looked at Long Feiyi with adoring eyes. Gu was still foolishly waiting here, but this guy had already gotten his hands on the item. When did he go to the Mu estate without alerting anyone? Long Feiyi finally looked straight at Gu and said coldly, "Inspect the goods." Gu didn't express his surprise, but it was impossible to hide the astonishment in his eyes. He didn't need to inspect it to know at a glance that it was the real deal. But, how did Long Feiyi get his hands on it? After all, it didn't belong to the Mu clan, but the Xia clan. His lie about the Mu clan was nothing more than a trap. He'd chosen the medicinal tea tree sapling because very few people knew about it. How did Long Feiyi know it was in the Xia clan's possession? Moreover, he'd stolen it without anyone noticing. There hadn't been any news of the Xia clan losing anything over the past few days. In other words, did Long Feiyi know about his scheme? "Are you done inspecting it?" Long Feiyi was a little impatient. "Yes, this is it. Your Highness Duke of Qin is so fast and capable." Gu wasn't stingy with his praise. Unexpectedly, Long Feiyi said coldly, "Then take it with you. I won't be sending you off." Gu's eyes flashed with a sinister coldness. Without a doubt, he'd lost. Long Feiyi was very disdainful of him, but he'd always been able to afford to lose. He smiled even more brilliantly and bowed gracefully. "Then this one won't be polite. Many thanks." He took the item and was about to leave. Everything seemed normal, but Han Yunxi couldn't hold it in any longer and burst out laughing. Although it was a laugh, it was even more mocking than Long Feiyi's cold face. More importantly, this made Gu realize that he'd lost all face in front of Han Yunxi. Finally, Gu broke down. His brilliant smile froze on his face even when the sky fell. Even after he'd walked out the door, his seductive features were still stiff. "Long Fei, consider yourself ruthless this time." Seeing Han Yunxi laugh, Long Feiyi's lips curved into a satisfied smile, but it quickly disappeared. "Chu Shifeng, prepare the carriage. We're returning to the capital," he ordered. "Are we going back now?" Han Yunxi asked anxiously. "You have business," Long Feiyi retorted. "Can we go back tonight? I still have some medicinal ingredients I haven't bought yet." It wasn't easy for them to come to Medicine City, so Han Yunxi wanted to buy more ingredients for later use. Long Feiyi didn't reply, but fell into deep thought. Seeing this, Han Yunxi hastened to say, "How about your Highness go back first? Qinxia can go back by herself." But Long Feiyi only said, "I'll take you somewhere. Let's go." Han Yunxi almost had a fright when she saw the words, Medical Materials Association. She never guessed that Long Feiyi would bring her here. She'd heard about this place when she was at the auction house. All the goods sold here were high-quality medicinal ingredients. Without a membership, it was impossible to enter. Supposedly, the expenses here were no less than those at the auction house. Han Yunxi only wanted to stroll around the small medicine market and find some cheap goods, because she didn't have much money on her. She'd already cheated Long Fei Yi out of a sum at the auction house. Although she'd cheated him, it was actually Long Fei Yi who'd paid the bill. 50,000 to 60,000 gold wasn't a small sum, so she knew her limits. But Long Fei Yi handed her a gold card as soon as they reached the entrance. This is your proof of entry. You need to use this card for all transactions here. Take it well. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance after sunset. Was this the legendary domineering president? Would he force it on her if she didn't want it? But before Han Yunxi could refuse, Long Fei Yi really did stuff the card into her hands and said, "Wait here after sunset. Don't forget." So speaking, he turned to leave. Han Yunxi didn't even have a chance to refuse. She suddenly realized that this fellow was so handsome even when he turned around. Han Yunxi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at the gold card in her hands. But since Long Fei Yi was so generous, she didn't hold back. She'd just pretend that she didn't charge him for this visit. She clutched the precious gold card and quickly vanished from the medicine market. Long Fei Yi could set his heart at ease by leaving Han Yunxi in the medicine market. Only extraordinary people could enter this place, but those who could manage it were even more so. As long as Han Yunxi didn't leave the medicine market had to take responsibility for her safety. Chu Shifeng assumed that His Highness Duke of Qin had other business to attend to, but he didn't go far. Instead, he headed for a nearby tea house. After all, His Highness Duke of Qin's time was as precious as his life. He had plenty of things to take care of. Did this count as another way to accompany a woman? In any case, Chu Shifeng didn't dare to imagine it. Long Fei Yi drank tea as he toyed with a simple blue and white porcelain bottle. His handsome face was covered in a layer of darkness. Chu Shifeng's heart gave a start at the sight of the bottle. His master hadn't taken it out in years. It contained a poison with a very pleasant name, Perplexing Butterfly Illusion. It was this very poison that had affected His Highness Duke of Qin's entire life. But the Duke of Qin knew nothing about it. A year ago, a similar poison had been found in the Northernly Spy's poison. Although it wasn't the exact same poison, it was the only clue. Otherwise, why would His Highness Duke of Qin have been investigating the Northernly Spy for so long? After all, the greater the threat Northernly posed to Tianning, the less Emperor Tianhui dared to spare any energy to deal with the Duke of Qin. Long Fei Yi stared at the little blue and white porcelain bottle in a daze. After a long time, he looked towards Chu Shifeng and said, "Does she recognize this poison?" Without a doubt, he was talking about Han Yunxi. Chu Shifeng gave a start and quickly said, "Your Highness, please reconsider." Han Yunxi was still a mystery even now. Even if she really was the useless young miss of the Han clan, her mother, Lady Tianqin, had unknown origins. Because of Han Yunxi's outstanding poison skills, such an important item couldn't be given to her. Long Fei Yi looked thoughtfully at Chu Shifeng before quickly putting away the little blue and white porcelain bottle. He didn't say much. Chu Shifeng couldn't figure out his thoughts and wanted to coax him, but after some hesitation, he shut his mouth. After sunset, Long Fei Yi met up with Han Yunxi outside the Medical Materials Association as promised. Han Yunxi really was a prodigal daughter. She'd bought a huge pile of medicinal ingredients and filled a carriage with them. Chu Shifeng was a little flabbergasted at the sight, but Long Fei Yi didn't even blink. When Han Yunxi tried to return the gold card to him, he only said, "You can keep it for now. In the future, your lordship will find you if I need medicinal ingredients." No problem. Many thanks, Your Highness. Han Yunxi was very straightforward. She didn't like arguing with a man about money. On one side, Chu Shifeng was a little flabbergasted at the sight. I don't have to worry about His Highness spending all his savings anymore. Han Yunxi had reaped the most bountiful rewards from this trip to Medicine City, while Long Fei hadn't come in vain. Both of them were in good moods, so they ate dinner at a restaurant before finally setting off for the capital. As for Gu, he'd long been surrounded by the Xia clan and had no time to spare for them. As for why Long Fei Yi knew the sapling was in the Xia clan's hands, that was his own skill. As for why the Xia clan knew the sapling was in Gu's hands, it was obvious that Long Fei Yi had exposed them. In any case, Gu had lost big this time, while Han Yunxi had gained the most. By the time they reached the capital, the poison plague had already passed. After a thorough cleanup, the capital was much cleaner than before. Even the air seemed fresher. Han Yunxi brought back 2 boxes of premium blood swallow's nest for Grand Concubine Yi, who was surprised. She thought that Han Yunxi had a knot in her heart after what happened with Princess Rongla last time. She never expected Han Yunxi to have the heart to bring her gifts. Grand Concubine Yi's worries were immediately dispelled. She took Han Yunxi's hand and asked with a smile, Yunxi, your stomach, it's about time you put in some effort. When will you add joy to our Duke of Qin's estate? Han Yunxi put on a false smile. She truly felt that Grand Concubine Yi had changed too much. Still, she didn't know that Long Fei Ye's words at the New Year's Eve banquet and his defiance of the imperial edict had spread throughout the circles. Her Qin Wangfei was currently being doted on. After a few perfunctory words, Han Yunxi left in a hurry. Meanwhile, Murong Wanru, who hadn't shown her face in a long time, was staring fixedly at her retreating form, her eyes filled with resentment. A few days ago, Marquis Pingbei had come to set the wedding date. Although Mu Fei had pushed it back, she didn't have the face to go out until she got married. Even Mu Fei was standing on Han Yunxi's side. Murong Wanru knew she had to find another backer, but who could help her at a time like this? Chapter 184. On the morning of the second day back at the estate, Han Yunxi discovered that Long Fei Yi had disappeared again. Surprisingly, Chu Shifeng actually invited Gu Beiyue to the hibiscus courtyard, saying that it was Long Fei Ye's orders. He wanted Gu Beiyue to take her pulse and see if her bones had recovered. Leaving aside Chu Shifeng, even Han Yunxi felt overwhelmed by the favor. For the first time, she realized that the giant iceberg's heart wasn't as cold and emotionless as his face. Gu Beiyue made a detailed examination, but couldn't explain why she'd been unconscious for so long. He only guessed that she'd been frightened out of her wits and overworked herself. Han Yunxi was well aware of her own body's condition, so she quickly changed the topic to ask about Gu Beiyue's poison plague. Once the antidote arrived, the treatment and prevention measures were timely. Everyone in and out of the palace rejoiced, but Emperor Tianhui wasn't happy at all. Even now, he wore a cold expression on his face. All of the servants in the palace who'd made small mistakes had been severely punished, leaving everyone on tenterhooks. Han Yunxi knew that she'd offended the man to death this time, but she couldn't be afraid of such things. She treated it all as a joke. Esteemed Wangfei, I heard that Gu is the owner of the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop. Gu Beiyue asked casually. The Tender Fragrance Tea Shop belongs to him too, but it's been sealed off. Han Yunxi thought back to Gu's humiliated appearance at the inn that day and found it hilarious. That rude fellow deserved to be taught a lesson by Long Fei Yi. I never expected him to have violet wormwood in his hands, Gu Beiyue probed. Han Yunxi didn't think too much of it. She only assumed that Gu Beiyue was curious, so she told him everything about Gu's martial arts and poison skills. A complicated look flashed past Gu Beiyue's eyes. He just nodded. He's a strange person. Han Yunxi didn't talk too much about Gu. Instead, she excitedly talked about buying medicine in Medicine City. This kind of good medicine could only resonate if she shared it with Gu Beiyue, the medicine jar. As the two of them chatted, it was soon evening. Chu Shifeng and Zhao Mama watched from the sidelines, feeling uncomfortable no matter how they looked. "Guard Chu, shouldn't you take this imperial physician away?" Granny Zhao asked in a low voice. "You're going to chase away esteemed Wang Fei's honored guests?" Chu Shifeng retorted. Granny Zhao naturally did not have the guts to do so. She said earnestly, "Guard Chu, don't ask Imperial Physician Gu to treat you next time." That day, after Gu Beiyue left, Han Yunxi originally planned to go to the Han family. However, after resting for a while, she unknowingly fell asleep and slept all the way until dawn. This kind of tiredness was similar to the detox system. It took up a lot of her energy to run, but Han Yunxi had never activated the detox system before. For the next few days, she felt a little lethargic, but her body was fine. She simply assumed that she'd really been exhausted from her days in Medicine City and didn't think much of it. Of course, there was no news of Long Fei Yi for the next few days either. It was as if he'd vanished from the face of the earth. She always knew that his whereabouts were a mystery and that he was a nosy person. But since when had Han Yunxi started to pay attention to his movements? She wanted to know what he was busy with, when he'd come back, and when he'd leave. Didn't he say he'd leave after the new year? Could it be that he's gone on a long journey again? After the poison plague, Emperor Tianhui didn't make any trouble for the Duke of Qin's estate, nor did he bring up the marriage alliance. The situation at the three-way battlefield was enough to keep him occupied. A month later, Tianning and Western Zhou's envoys met at the three-way battlefield. Supposedly, they'd signed a contract for cooperation. Afterwards, Western Zhou began to send back the troops that had left the battlefield in batches. The marriage alliance was ruined, but Western Zhou still sent back its troops. Heaven knows what kind of concessions Emperor Tianhui had made in the contract. In any case, Tianning country must have suffered a great loss since the contract wasn't announced to the public. Han Yunxi didn't understand national affairs, but she could tell that Western Zhou's emperor doted on Princess Rongla's marriage alliance on the surface. In reality, as long as Tianning made concessions in other areas, the two countries wouldn't necessarily have to work together on the basis of a marriage alliance. In other words, Emperor Tianhui didn't have to force Long Fei Yi. But if he didn't force Long Fei Yi, he'd have to pay a higher price. Everything was a means and a tool. Goals were the foundation. Based on this logic, what did the high and mighty Princess Rongla have to be proud of? Since ancient times, how many members of the imperial family could truly control their own fates? Thinking up to here, Han Yunxi felt that she was lucky. Although the Han family had been defeated, they'd still given her absolute freedom. But while Han Yunxi was rejoicing, something big happened to the Han family. By the time little Chen Xiang rushed over, Han Yunxi was still asleep. Ignoring Zhao Mama's attempts to stop her, she rushed straight into the bedroom, so anxious that tears were about to spill from her eyes. "Mistress, 7th Madam's been captured by Shantian Prefecture's people. They said our Han family clinic caused 2 deaths. Hearing this, Han Yunxi practically jumped out of her sleep. "What's going on?" "Mistress, Shantian Prefecture's people aren't polite at all." "Hurry and go, we'll talk on the way," little Chen Xiang urged, afraid that 7th Madam would suffer grievances at Shantian Prefecture. Logically speaking, the Han family was esteemed Wang Fei's maternal family. Moreover, after the new year, there were rumors that esteemed Wang Fei was favored by the Duke of Qin. Even if the Han family really did commit a crime, a trifling Shantian Prefecture wouldn't dare to be impudent. Hearing little Chen Xiang's words, Han Yunxi felt that something was off. She immediately tidied up and rushed to Shantian Prefecture with little Qinxiang. Along the way, little Qinxiang explained everything. Yesterday, a woman, Madame Qin, had brought her elderly mother-in-law to the Han family pharmacy in the southern part of the city to see a doctor. Madame Chen's husband had died early. Besides her mother-in-law, she also had a young son. The family was poor and dejected, relying on her to do needlework alone. The pharmacy's shopkeeper, Dr. Li, took pity on them and personally gave them a prescription. He didn't even collect money for the medicine. But who knew that last night, Madame Chen's mother-in-law died after taking the medicine? Early this morning, Madame Chen dragged her mother-in-law's corpse to the entrance of Shantian Prefecture, crying and shouting to sue the Han family pharmacy for causing her death and demanding compensation. Ever since Hong Kong's accident, the Han family's pharmacy had basically been closed down. In the past, the Han family's pharmacy was a place where the rich and powerful of the imperial capital went. They even had designated private doctors. Now that their reputation was ruined, their business naturally declined. The small pharmacy in the southern part of the city was the only one left. Seventh Madam had insisted on keeping it. No matter what, the Han family was still a medical family. Although they had lost, they couldn't not have a pharmacy. Secondly, Seventh Madam was kind-hearted and kept this small pharmacy to help those poor people. If one was in a hurry, they would go to any doctor. If one was afraid of death, one would blindly take medicine, let alone poor people. It was already good enough to be able to get treatment at a low price or even for free. Who would dare to despise the Han family? It was an act of kindness, but who would have thought that something like this would happen? What illness did that mother-in-law have? What was the cause of death? Was it confirmed that it was related to the medicine? Han Yunxi asked seriously. It was a cold. Master, even I know what medicine to use for this illness. Dr. Li couldn't have made a mistake. But that Madame Qin insisted that she died after taking our medicine. Shantian Prefecture is probably conducting an interrogation right now. We don't know what the situation is. If Shantian Prefecture hadn't come to arrest her, we wouldn't have known. Little Qinxiang had stayed in the Han family for a period of time. She took care of little Yi all day long and mixed in with medical books and medicinal herbs. She knew quite a lot from what she saw and heard. What she said wasn't an exaggeration. With Manager Li's ability, how could a small cold kill someone? When Han Yunxi and little Qinxiang hurried to Shantian Prefecture, the gate was closed and the interrogation was ongoing. Seeing Han Yunxi arrive, the governor naturally didn't dare to neglect her. He was about to adjourn the court to pay his respects when Han Yunxi personally walked into the court. Seeing this, the governor hurriedly got up and knelt in salute. This official greets esteemed Wang Fei. In an instant, all the yamen runners in the court followed suit and knelt in salute. Han Yunxi glanced around and saw Seventh Madam and Madame Qin, who had complained, kneeling in the hall. Seventh Madam secretly gave Han Yunxi a look. Han Yunxi didn't understand what she meant, but intuition told her that it wasn't a good thing. Madame Qin was wearing a white dress and morning hair. She didn't dare look at Han Yunxi and crawled on the ground, her thin and weak body trembling. You may all rise. This Wang Fei made a special trip to attend the interrogation. Although it concerns the Han family, it also concerns 2 lives. It's definitely not a game. Governor doesn't need to give this Wang Fei face. Just do your job. She made her attitude clear and sat down on the side. The governor stood up and nodded. A complicated look flashed through his eyes, but he still respectfully smiled and ordered someone to serve tea. Rest assured, esteemed Wang Fei. This official will handle this matter impartially. Then where did the interrogation go? Tell us, Governor. Han Yunxi said again. Who would have thought that the governor would say, esteemed Wang Fei, the witness and material evidence are all present. You can basically convict her. Convict her. Han Yunxi frowned. Dr. Li mistakenly put the poison in the cold medicine, causing the patient to die. Although it was a mistake, it was still murder. The governor said seriously. Mistakenly. Where's the evidence? How could Han Yunxi believe him? The governor gave a look and the private advisor immediately respectfully presented three things. One was the autopsy report, the second was the medical examination report, and the last was the prescription written by Dr. Li. Han Yunxi skimmed through the contents. According to the autopsy report, the deceased had caught a severe cold, but died from a poison called kuagen. The medical examination was very detailed, detailing the 3 packets of medicine Madame Chen had brought. There were a total of 11 ingredients listed, all of which were listed. It really was a prescription for treating colds, but there was an extra poison in it. It was none other than kuagen. Moreover, the most fatal thing was that Dr. Li's prescription did indeed include kuagen. Han Yunxi silently read the 11 medicines. She seemed to have discovered something and her eyes flashed with a trace of complexity. Kuagen was poisonous and acute, but at the same time, it was also a good medicine. A small amount of kuagen was used together with a certain amount of medicine to eliminate the toxicity and have a better effect. However, kuagen wasn't needed to treat cold. No matter how muddle-headed Dr. Li was, he wouldn't put kuagen in the prescription, right? Although puzzled, Han Yunxi didn't show it and asked indifferently, "Where's Madame Li?" Dr. Li was the main culprit. 7th concubine was only the owner of the pharmacy. No matter what, she had to find Dr. Li. Who would have thought that the governor would say, "Esteemed Wang Fei, Dr. Li is already dead." What? This news made the always calm Han Yunxi explode. How could this be? How did he die? On the way here, he bit his tongue and committed suicide. The governor replied truthfully. To the readers, I know that I don't update much. This period is a bit special. Thank you for your understanding. I will make it up to you in the future. Chapter 185. Upon hearing that Dr. Li bit his tongue to commit suicide, Han Yunxi's eyes darkened. 7th Madam finally couldn't help but speak up, "Esteemed Wang Fei, it's impossible for Dr. Li to prescribe the wrong medicine. Dr. Li has practiced medicine in the Han family's medical clinic for 10 years and has never failed. He definitely wouldn't make such a low-level mistake. 7th Madam, this prescription was written in Dr. Li's handwriting. The reason why this official convicted Dr. Li of manslaughter and not of intentional homicide was because he had practiced medicine for many years and had superb medical skills. Now that the evidence is conclusive, is 7th Madam implying that this official is framing him?" The prefectural magistrate was very blunt. 7th Madam had no room to refute and shook her head. "Impossible, absolutely impossible. Dr. Li's death is too strange. Dr. Li bit his tongue to commit suicide. In this official's opinion, he didn't commit suicide because he was afraid of punishment, but because he felt guilty and used his death to atone for his crimes." The prefectural magistrate was very certain. "It can't be, there must be a misunderstanding here. It can't be." 7th Madam wasn't convinced and looked towards Han Yunxi for help. The Han family's reputation had already been tarnished because of the Crown Prince's incident. Now, even a small medical clinic that was doing good had caused a death. How could the Han family maintain a foothold in the medical world? How could they revive their family business? Dr. Li committed suicide out of fear of punishment and admitted to this crime, but the Han family couldn't admit to it. Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes as she looked at the 3 pieces of evidence in her hands. She had the same thoughts as 7th Madam. Dr. Li's mistake was too outrageous and his death was too sudden. His death undoubtedly forced the Han family into a dead end. At this time, Madame Chen, who had her head lowered, looked resentfully at 7th Madam and choked out, "It doesn't matter if it's a misunderstanding or not. In any case, he died after taking your medicine, so you have to compensate. My husband is no longer here and my mother-in-law took care of my son when he was young. Now that my mother-in-law is gone, how am I supposed to live in the future?" Han Yunxi was a little worried about this Madame Qin, but seeing her flustered and timid expression, Han Yunxi became even more suspicious. Only, this kind of poor woman, where did she get the courage to frame the Han family for a bit of compensation? It seemed that the main problem still lay with Dr. Li. What 7th concubine was worried about was also what Han Yunxi was worried about. Even if Dr. Li didn't commit suicide to escape punishment, once this case was decided, the one to bear the responsibility would still be Dr. Li. At most, the Han family would have to pay compensation and wouldn't suffer. However, this compensation would also be admitting that the medical hall had killed someone. It was a small matter if the medical hall couldn't continue operating, but it was a big matter if its reputation was ruined. "Your Highness, if there is no problem, this official will be convicted," the magistrate asked tentatively. "No problem." There seemed to be no problem and 7th concubine had nothing to refute. However, there were many problems with Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi drank a mouthful of tea and prepared to ask questions, but a yamen runner suddenly ran in with news. The justice courts wanted to bring this case to trial and wanted the magistrate of Shantian Hall to quickly hand it over. In Tianing country, most cases in the capital were handled by the magistrate of Shantian Hall. The justice courts were equivalent to the highest court of justice. Most of them handled major cases, including those involving members of the imperial family. The justice courts also cared about matters between the Han family's medical hall and the common people's families. Were they too idle, or did they overestimate the Han family? Why would the justice courts bring this case to trial for no reason at all? Han Yunxi asked with raised eyebrows. However, the yamen runner began to stammer, not daring to speak. "Answer truthfully," Han Yunxi said coldly. "Your Highness, this one heard from the justice courts that it was the Empress Dowager who just gave the order. The Empress Dowager said that the Han family already had a record of misdiagnosing the Crown Prince. If they killed someone again, they would be severely punished. They would revoke the Han family's right to practice medicine in Tianing country." At these words, the entire hall fell silent. 7th concubine's face turned pale and she almost fainted. What did it mean to revoke their right to practice medicine? It meant that no one in the Han family would ever be able to treat patients and prescribe medicine again. It meant that the Han family had no fate with the medical world. It meant that the Han family would never be able to rise again. This was a disgrace that no one in the Han family could accept. Han Yunxi's eyes narrowed with cold light. She finally understood what was going on. For the past month, she had been wondering why the two masters in the palace hadn't made any moves after suffering such a huge loss. She didn't expect the Empress Dowager to make her move. She couldn't do anything to her, so she made an example of the Han family. What did this count for? Since the Empress Dowager had made her move, then this time she would let the Empress Dowager know that no one could touch her maiden family. A cold smile rose to Han Yunxi's lips as she said mildly, "Since this is the Empress Dowager's order, the magistrate should do as she says." The magistrate of Shantian Hall had been waiting for Han Yunxi's words. He immediately adjourned the court and handed over the relevant materials and personnel to the justice courts. The justice courts would open the trial tomorrow. 7th concubine wasn't the main culprit, so she wasn't locked up. As soon as they left the justice courts, 7th concubine couldn't wait to whisper, "Yunxi, Dr. Li must have been bribed." Han Yunxi nodded. Anyone with eyes could see that Dr. Li had been bribed. Moreover, Han Yunxi was almost certain that the person behind the scenes was the Empress Dowager. But the justice courts needed evidence to try a case. Dr. Li had committed suicide because he had steeled his heart to shut his mouth. It wouldn't be easy to find evidence that he had been bribed. Seventh concubine, you can set your heart at ease. Even if we can't find the person behind Dr. Li, this matter won't implicate the Han family, Han Yunxi was very certain. Hearing these words, seventh concubine hesitated before murmuring, Yunxi, recently there's been rumors that you've gained His Highness Duke of Qin's favor. This matter, is it true? If you have the Duke of Qin's support, then I can set my mind at ease. Han Yunxi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What did this have to do with Long Fei Yi? She hadn't seen Long Fei Yi in days, all right. Han Yunxi took a deep breath and said seriously, seventh concubine, I can handle this matter even without the Duke of Qin's appearance. Trust me. As she spoke, she gently lifted her bangs, her lively eyes flashing with the light of wisdom. It was as if she could see through everything and had a power that made people feel at ease. Seventh concubine realized that she'd misunderstood, but she still couldn't help asking, Yunxi, then the matter between you and the Duke of Qin, it's fine, it's fine. Seventh concubine, you should hurry back. Don't make a worry. Han Yunxi played dumb as she quickly helped seventh concubine into the carriage and told the driver to hurry off. Although the rumors had spread for a long time, this was the first time someone had asked Han Yunxi about it in front of her face. She didn't know how to answer. Seeing the carriage leave, Han Yunxi exhaled in relief. But who knew that little Chen Xiang would grumble behind her back, Mistress, I haven't gotten on the carriage yet. Only then did Han Yunxi remember that little Chen Xiang was still here. She turned back, but before she could speak, little Chen Xiang spoke again. Mistress, what do you mean by fine? Han Yunxi's ears immediately turned red as she narrowed her eyes and drew closer. Little thing, your mouth is getting more and more formidable. Little Chen Xiang giggled and was about to escape when Han Yunxi pulled her back. Let's go, come with me to Dr. Li's house. Although Dr. Li's body was still in the justice courts, the Li family had already set up a mourning tent and set up a memorial tablet. The entire family was dressed in mourning clothes and the atmosphere was very heavy. Han Yunxi didn't disturb anyone and only saw Dr. Li's wife, Madame Hong. Sit. There's no one else here, so there's no need to stand on ceremony. Even though Han Yunxi had said so, Madame Hong still didn't dare to sit. She respectfully stood to the side with her head lowered in silence. Was she afraid of her because of her identity? Or was there another reason for her guilty conscience? For something like this to happen. Madame Li, please restrain your grief. Take care of yourself, Han Yunxi said indifferently. Madame Hong quietly bowed. Thank you for your concern, Wang Fei. Madame Li, do you think Dr. Li might have prescribed the wrong medicine? Han Yunxi suddenly asked, getting straight to the point. Madame Hong suddenly looked up, but when she met Han Yunxi's clear eyes, she immediately lowered her head and choked with sobs. This commoner also doesn't believe it, but that prescription, that handwriting is really his. Han Yunxi didn't like people who spoke without looking at the other person. Madame Li, has Dr. Li been acting strangely these past few days? Has he been in contact with anyone? Han Yunxi asked again. Madame Hong still had her head lowered and didn't look at Han Yunxi. She didn't think too much and just shook her head. Everything was fine. How could something like this happen? As she spoke, she began to sob in a low voice. Han Yunxi stood up and walked closer step by step. Madame Hong immediately retreated and lowered her head even more. Madame Li, do you think Dr. Li might have some difficulties? Han Yunxi asked again. Madame Hong's body clearly trembled and she quickly explained, Wang Fei, what difficulties could he have? No matter how difficult it is, he can't harm others. He's a doctor. He must have made a mistake and realized his mistake later on. He must have felt guilty and blamed himself. Woo-woo. As Madame Hong spoke, she began to cry and couldn't continue speaking. Han Yunqi sighed softly and retreated. She didn't make things difficult for Madame Hong and comforted her with a few words before leaving with little Chen Xiang. When they got on the carriage, little Chen Xiang couldn't wait to say, "Master, how could Madame Li be like this? Even I, an outsider, feel that Dr. Li's death was strange." "Why didn't she find it strange?" "You could tell." Han Yunqi said lightly. "Madame Li must know something." Little Chen Xiang's face was serious. Han Yunqi smiled faintly and didn't say anything. She didn't even go to the small clinic in the south of the city and directly returned to the Han residence. She hit a wall, didn't she? When the Empress Dowager heard Han Yunqi's movements after leaving the Li residence, she sneered. "Empress Dowager, even if she investigates to Madame Li, as long as Madame Li doesn't speak, no matter how suspicious she is, this case will be convicted tomorrow." The person who spoke was none other than Murong Wanru from the Duke of Qin's manor. Although they were in the palace, they were still paying attention to the murder case at the clinic. The Empress Dowager never expected that Han Yunqi wouldn't rely on her. Instead, Grand Concubine Yi's beloved daughter, Murong Wanru, would take the initiative to come to her door and offer her a scheme to seal off the Han family. Murong Wanru never thought that she'd betray Grand Concubine Yi one day and stand on the Empress Dowager's side. Grand Concubine Yi treated her with favor as great as a mountain, but this time it was Grand Concubine Yi who betrayed her first. She didn't regret it. Grand Concubine Yi had said before that she'd marry the Duke of Qin as a concubine and stay at the Duke of Qin's estate forever. But in the end, she'd fallen to the point of losing her chastity and being forced to marry into Marquis Pingbei's estate. Besides getting angry, Grand Concubine Yi didn't fight for anything for her. Grand Concubine Yi had said before that she'd teach Han Yunqi a lesson if she dared to show up, but in the end, not only did the Duke of Qin see her in a different light, but even Grand Concubine Yi seemed to be possessed by a demon. She treated her well and listened to her words. How could Murong Wanru take all this? She refused to admit that she'd lost to Han Yunqi. She only knew that if she continued to place her hopes on Grand Concubine Yi, she'd only end up getting married obediently. Only the Empress Dowager could change all this. Chapter 186. The next day, the justice courts began their trial of the Han family clinic murder case as scheduled. It was supposed to be an ordinary murder case, but the Empress Dowager had issued an order that the justice courts would hear the case and that official Ouyang would preside over it. Actually, the materials submitted by Shuntian Prefecture yesterday were already very detailed and sufficient. Official Ouyang only needed to conduct the final judgment. Official Ouyang understood very well that the Empress Dowager's decision to bring the case to the justice courts was only a pretense. She wanted to add on the Han family's crimes and revoke their right to practice medicine in Tianing country. Everyone was present, but Han Yunqi was still sitting on one side, listening in. Because Han Yunqi was sitting calmly on one side, official Ouyang felt even more pressure. He was careful with every word as he patiently combed through the case once more. Seeing that Han Yunqi had no objections, official Ouyang began to pass his judgment. The 3 pieces of evidence all show that Dr. Li wrote the wrong prescription, causing Madame Chen's mother-in-law to die from poisoning. Dr. Li committed suicide to avoid punishment for manslaughter, so we won't pursue his crimes. Here, official Ouyang paused. 7th Madam had wanted to cry out injustice, but Han Yunqi had told her not to worry yesterday, so she could only endure it. Han Yunqi was leisurely drinking tea, looking as calm as ever. She wasn't anxious at all. Seventh Madam couldn't figure her out, but official Ouyang was flustered by the sight. Judging from the evidence alone, this case was practically unassailable. Based on his many years of experience, it was impossible to overturn the verdict. However, seeing Han Yunxi so calm and composed made official Ouyang inexplicably uneasy. The room was eerily silent. No one had any objections, so official Ouyang continued, the Han family made a mistake in their use of personnel and failed in their supervision. They can't escape blame and should compensate Madam Qin with 1,000 taels of silver. Here, official Ouyang paused again and looked towards Han Yunxi, only to see that Han Yunxi was still calm and composed, as if she hadn't heard a thing. Only then did official Ouyang relax. He thought that the evidence is irrefutable. Even if esteemed Wang Fei wants to argue, she has no grounds to do so. It looks like this is the only way. As for revoking the Han family's right to practice medicine, that was the Empress Dowager's order. It had nothing to do with the Supreme Court. Withdrawing his gaze, official Ouyang silently exhaled before continuing to read the judgment. According to esteemed Empress Dowager's orders, the Han family's misdiagnosis of the Crown Prince is already a heinous crime. Now that they've failed to repent, they've made such a grave mistake. Therefore, the South Medical Center of the city shall be sealed and all of the Han family's medicinal ingredients shall be confiscated. The Han family's right to practice medicine in Tianning shall be permanently revoked. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire place fell silent. This was too. Seventh concubine couldn't hold it in any longer and shouted angrily, "You can't. The Han family is innocent. Dr. Li must be." Before she could finish speaking, Han Yunxi finally raised her hand to indicate for her to calm down. Seventh concubine panted angrily and was extremely agitated. She glanced at Han Yunxi. Although she was unable to calm down, she still forced herself to calm down. Yesterday, the Empress Dowager only said that she wanted to revoke the qualification to practice medicine. Today, she added another condition, which was to confiscate the Han family's medicinal herbs. The medicinal herbs in the Han family's warehouse were equivalent to the Han family's property. Was the Empress Dowager determined to make the Han family lose everything? She still remembered that her old life had been saved by Madame Tianxin. If Han Yunxi didn't stay calm and listen to the end, she really wouldn't have seen the Empress Dowager's ruthlessness. She was simply going too far. Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes and looked at official Ouyang coldly. Official Ouyang was so frightened that he immediately shifted the blame. Esteemed Wang Fei, this is the Empress Dowager's intention and not the Supreme Court's. This official is only acting on behalf of official Ouyang. Didn't you hear seventh concubine cry out for injustice? Han Yunxi coldly interrupted him. This official Ouyang was stunned, but he immediately defended himself. Esteemed Wang Fei, you are also clear about the entire case. The 3 pieces of evidence are present. If seventh concubine wants to cry out for injustice, then she should bring out the evidence to prove her innocence, right? Evidence. Han Yunxi gracefully put down her crossed legs and stood up. She coldly said, the 3 pieces of evidence in this Wang Fei's hands are evidence. Madame Chen's mother-in-law's death was suspicious. Dr. Li's death was also suspicious. Someone is maliciously framing the Han family. As she spoke, she slammed the autopsy report, medicine appraisal report, and prescription in her hands onto official Ouyang's table. With a pang sound, it resounded through the silent hall. This. Esteemed Wang Fei, this evidence is evidence that Dr. Li wrote the wrong prescription. How could it be evidence of framing? Esteemed Wang Fei, in court, you can't speak carelessly. Official Ouyang really didn't understand and only thought that Han Yunxi was being unreasonable. Han Yunxi asked, which coroner wrote this autopsy report? Send it up. Also, which doctor wrote this medicine appraisal report? Call them up as well. This Wang Fei has something to ask them. Hearing this, official Ouyang finally understood what esteemed Wang Fei wanted to do. So she was suspecting these two pieces of evidence. If the evidence was fake, then there really was a problem with this case. Only, what could be wrong with these two pieces of evidence? Not to mention anything else, just based on the prescription that Dr. Li left behind, it was enough to prove that the autopsy report and medicine appraisal report were real. Actually, even without the other two reports, just based on Dr. Li's prescription, it was enough to convict Dr. Li and the Han family. The strangest thing about this case was Dr. Li's mistake and suicide. Official Ouyang also knew this, but since the Empress Dowager had given an order, he naturally wouldn't go against it. Moreover, Dr. Li was already dead, so no matter how strange it was, it couldn't be investigated. As for the authenticity of the evidence, official Ouyang didn't believe that Han Yunxi would be able to find any flaws in it. He followed Han Yunxi's lead and immediately gave an order, "Someone come, summon the coroner Old Xia and the imperial Dr. Lin." Old Xia was a full-time coroner in Shantian Palace and Imperial Dr. Lin was an imperial doctor in the Imperial Hospital. They both worked part-time in the Supreme Court in Shantian Palace. The two of them were first-class professionals and had a good reputation in the circle. Once they heard that Han Yunxi was questioning their report, the two of them were filled with indignation. After coming in and giving a bow, Old Xia couldn't help opening his mouth first. "Princess Consort, I was the one who examined Madame Li's body and wrote the report by myself. If there is any problem, please point it out." Han Yunxi liked straightforward people. Hearing Old Xia say this, she didn't hold back. "Are you certain that Madame Chen's mother-in-law was poisoned by Kuegan and died?" "I'm certain. The report clearly states that Kuegan poison was mixed in with the medicine. The medicine left in the victim's mouth was also found to contain Kuegan after it was extracted." Old Xia was filled with confidence as he said, "Princess Consort is also a person who knows poison. If you don't believe it, you can personally examine the body." Han Yunxi nodded and then asked, "What is the time of death?" "The night before yesterday, 7 to 9 o'clock. After taking the medicine, she immediately died from the poison." Old Xia clearly remembered. Han Yunxi nodded and didn't ask anything else. She looked at Dr. Lin. "Dr. Lin, have you checked the 3 bags of herbs that Madame Chen brought?" Dr. Lin was also very confident. "I've checked them all. There are a total of 11 herbs that are the same as Dr. Li's prescription, including Kuegan. Are the 3 bags of herbs still here?" Han Yunxi asked again. Official Ouyang immediately had someone bring the herbs over. They were all wrapped up and placed on a plate. Han Yunxi looked over it and was very satisfied. She then asked, "Dr. Lin, Dr. Li's prescription clearly stated the quantities, so why didn't you write the quantities in your report? Did you weigh them one by one? Are they all the same quantities?" No one had thought of this problem. The prescription was poisoned and the herbs were poisoned. This was already enough evidence, so what was the use of quantities? Moreover, the quantities in the prescription were just an estimate. For example, it was around 1 tael or 1 qian. When filling the prescription, it was just a rough estimate, so it didn't need to be precise. Dr. Lin was very surprised and filled with disbelief. Han Yunxi was considered a member of the medical world, but she actually asked this kind of meaningless question. "Princess Consort, because the quantities of the herbs are the same as what Dr. Li wrote in his prescription and the poison is among them, this official did not weigh them one by one." Dr. Lin explained. "The same type." Han Yunxi gave a cold laugh. "Dr. Lin, what do you mean by the same type? Does the same type mean the same quantity? The examination must be strict, meticulous, and professional. Do you need this princess to remind you of this?" When these words were said, Dr. Lin's expression changed. Han Yunxi was simply doubting his professionalism and work ethic. Dr. Lin was also angry, but of course, he did not dare act up. He suppressed his anger and seriously explained, "Princess Consort, this official has been a doctor for over 20 years and has never made a mistake. Madame Chen's mother-in-law was poisoned to death and it has nothing to do with the quantity of the herbs. As long as the prescription is poisonous, it can be used as evidence. Okra is both poison and medicine. If it was placed in other prescriptions, it would not be poisonous, but if it was placed in Dr. Li's prescription, it would definitely be poisonous. It has nothing to do with the quantity." This Dr. Lin knew quite a bit about Kuegin. Only, discussing poison in front of her, wasn't he overestimating himself? Hearing this, Han Yunxi gave Imperial Physician Lin a meaningful look. She didn't know why Imperial Physician Lin, who had been full of righteousness and self-confidence, suddenly felt diffident at her glance. Only, this was just a fleeting feeling. Dr. Lin firmly believed that there was no need to look into the quantity of the herbs. He thought that Han Yunxi would not be able to refute the results of the trial, so she was trying to nitpick and cause trouble. So Dr. Lin continued, "So this official feels that there is no need to check the quantity of the herbs." Han Yunxi nodded and asked with a smile, "Dr. Lin, you also know that Kuegin is not only a medicine, but also a poison. Then do you know that the quantity of the poison affects the time it takes for the poison to take effect and even the symptoms of the poison?" Once these words were said, Dr. Lin immediately froze. Coroner Xia on the side was also shocked. Perhaps other people did not react, but these two professionals immediately had a bad premonition. The quantity of the poison. The time it takes for the poison to take effect. Dr. Lin had not considered this. He only knew that Madame Chin had been poisoned to death by Kuegin and the autopsy had confirmed the poison, so everything was logical. Seeing Dr. Lin and old Xiao's silence, official Ouyang also felt uneasy. "Princess Consort, there will always be a mistake in the quantity of the herbs. How can you be so calculative?" Han Yunxi gave a cold smile. "Although Kuegin is an acute poison, the quantity is different and the time it takes for the poison to take effect is also different. Coroner Xia had just said that Madame Chen's mother-in-law died the night before yesterday and the poison took the medicine. However, with the amount of Kuegin written in this prescription and the combined effects of the other 10 herbs, even if the remaining 3 packets of medicine were to be consumed, the poison would not take effect. With this amount, it would take at least 3 days for the poison to take effect and kill the patient. Either the quantity of Kuegin in these 3 bags is far more than what is written in the prescription, or the person who poisoned Madame Chen's mother-in-law was someone else." When Han Yunxi said this, official Ouyang was stunned and the entire crowd was silent. Chapter 187. In the silence, everyone looked at each other in dismay. No one thought that it would turn out like this. The difference between dying from the poison as soon as she took the medicine and dying from the poison 3 days later was too big. Moreover, although errors were allowed in the prescription, wasn't it too inconceivable to double the amount? Even if Dr. Li made a mistake in prescribing the medicine, he wouldn't have doubled the amount. How could this be manslaughter? This was clearly intentional murder. If the actual amount of medicine in the 3 packs was the same as what was written in the prescription and Dr. Li didn't make a mistake, then Madame Chen's mother-in-law's death wasn't because she drank the medicine, but because someone deliberately murdered her. What was the truth? Did Dr. Li deliberately kill her, or was the murderer someone else? The originally simple case became complicated and confusing because of Han Yunxi's analysis of the poison. 7th Madam suddenly looked at Madame Chin. In an instant, everyone also looked over. Madame Chin lowered her head very, very low. Her body trembled and she didn't dare to speak. Official Ouyang's eyes flashed with a complicated look. After hesitating for a long time, he still opened his mouth. "Dr. Lin, the amount of Kuegin and the time of the poison, is it really like this?" When these words were said, Han Yunxi sneered in her heart. Official Ouyang really knew how to ask questions. Asking Dr. Lin like this, it was obvious that he didn't believe her. Dr. Lin was also very tactful. This official is not talented and really doesn't understand. If official Ouyang doesn't believe me, then you can do an experiment on the spot. Han Yunxi coldly said. Today, she wanted everyone to be convinced, whether it was in the hall or in the palace. According to the rules, we do have to test it. Official Ouyang braced himself and said. He had to give the Empress Dowager an explanation. Han Yunxi immediately ordered someone to prepare the medicine according to the prescription and had Dr. Lin verify that the amount of medicine was the same as what was written in the prescription. Then in the hall, she boiled the medicine in front of everyone. Official Ouyang, for the sake of fairness, find someone to test the medicine. Han Yunxi coldly said. Seeing Han Yunxi's cold attitude, official Ouyang's heart turned cold. He ordered someone to find a death row prisoner and have him drink an entire bowl of medicine in front of everyone. Who would have thought that after the time it took for a stick of incense to burn had passed, the condemned prisoner was still perfectly fine? Lord Ouyang, do you have any other questions? Han Yunxi questioned. Official Ouyang immediately shook his head. How could he dare to speak? This princess consort could be called the poison consort. Arguing with her about poison was undoubtedly seeking death. Lord Ouyang fell silent, and so did everyone else. Since Han Yunxi's statement had been confirmed, then the truth would depend on the quantity of the poison. Han Yunxi walked to the side and personally opened the 3 packs of herbs. She separated the 11 herbs in each pack into 11 piles. Imperial Physician Lin, can I trouble you to weigh it on the spot? Han Yunxi was still very polite. Although Imperial Physician Lin was familiar with the Kuegan, it was far from being as familiar as Han Yunxi. He had indeed neglected the time of the poison's activation. Moreover, in terms of quantity, if it was any other medicine, he could tell how heavy it was with a single glance. But the Kuegan was very light and he rarely touched it, so it was hard for him to grasp the quantity. Adding in the fact that he had not considered the quantity from the beginning, this made Imperial Physician Lin feel even more guilty. While he was panicking, hearing Han Yunxi's polite words, Imperial Physician Lin nodded in fear. He did not dare delay as he ordered someone to bring over the scale. In the silence, time slowly passed. Imperial Physician Lin's hands were trembling at first, but he quickly entered the right state. He carefully weighed the medicine while making notes on a piece of white paper. Only, when he weighed the first portion of the Kuegan, Imperial Physician Lin's hands suddenly trembled and the weight fell down with a loud, ping sound. This weight not only fell to the ground, it also fell to everyone's hearts. Everyone's hearts were filled with fear as they guessed that there was a problem with the Kuegan's quantity. They were getting closer and closer to the truth. Imperial Physician Lin's face was deathly pale. He looked at Han Yunxi and hurriedly picked up the weight. He weighed it again and hurriedly recorded the quantity on a piece of white paper. Han Yunxi looked at it and calmly signaled Imperial Physician Lin to continue. Soon, Imperial Physician Lin listed the quantity of each medicine in the 3 packs. When he put down the scale, his hands were soft and he could no longer raise his strength. Han Yunxi unfolded the white paper and faced Official Ouyang. Official Ouyang, the prescription is on your table, please compare it. Is it okay? The more polite Han Yunxi's tone was, the more uncertain Official Ouyang felt. His face was ghastly pale as he hurriedly opened the prescription. Once he confirmed it, he plopped down on the main judge's seat. Official Ouyang, what's the result? Han Yunxi asked loudly. Official Ouyang didn't want to answer, but he had to answer. He stood up in fear and answered, it's the same. The quantity of the medicine is the same. The quantity was the same. The quantity of the Kuegan was also the same. That kind of quantity wasn't enough to immediately cause death. So, the person who poisoned her was someone else. The truth. Everyone present was shocked. No one thought that the truth would be like this. Seventh Madam was the first to recover. She angrily glared at Madam Chen and angrily cursed, "It must be you. In order to ask for compensation, you poisoned your mother-in-law and framed my Han family. You woman, you're truly vicious. My Han family didn't take a single cent of your medical fees, yet you repay kindness with enmity. Has your heart been eaten by a dog?" Madam Chen suddenly raised her head and anxiously denied, "It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything. I don't know anything." At this time, Han Yunxi's good temper finally ran out. With a cold face, she walked over to Madam Chen step by step. Madam Chen was kneeling and Han Yunxi was standing. This made it seem like Han Yunxi was high and mighty. Adding in the anger coming from her body and her strong aura, Madam Chen was so scared that she almost fainted. She didn't even dare look at Han Yunxi. She crawled on the ground and cried, "It wasn't me, it really wasn't me. I didn't do anything." "If it wasn't you, then who was it?" Han Yunxi coldly asked. She had suspected Madam Chen before, but she didn't believe that Madam Chen had the courage to frame the Han family. Moreover, the mistake in Dr. Li's prescription was very strange. Whether it was Madam Chen or Dr. Li, there was someone behind them. The truth had not been found yet. Or it could be said that the real culprit had not been found yet. Han Yunxi was only the one in the palace, but she needed proof. Hearing Han Yunxi's question, Madam Chen was even more afraid. Her body trembled and her face was pressed to the ground. She wished that she could find a hole in the ground to escape from this terrifying scene. "It wasn't me, I don't know anything. I don't know. I don't know, I don't want the money. I don't want you to compensate me. Let me go." Actually, when Han Yunxi saw the prescription yesterday, she knew that there was a problem. She had endured until today, but she didn't plan on letting anyone go. Daring to have ideas about the Han family, she was truly angered this time. She slowly squatted down and suddenly pulled Madam Chen up. She stared right into her eyes. "If it wasn't you, then who did it? Who would give you money? Don't think that just because you don't say anything, someone will protect you." Madam Chen was scared. She couldn't care about anything else as she broke free from Han Yunxi's hand and retreated far away. Once she retreated, she realized that she had made a move against Qin Wangfei. Her face turned green as she shook her head in fear. "Princess Consort, please forgive me. This commoner doesn't know anything. I don't know." Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes as she walked over step by step. Her entire body was releasing a terrifying killing intent. In court, wasn't this being forced? However, no one present dared to make a sound, afraid that they would invite trouble onto themselves. Princess Consort, she was angry. Han Yunxi slowly approached Madam Chen. However, this time, before she could speak, Madam Chen broke down first. "I'll talk. I'll talk. Don't come over, I'll talk." Han Yunxi stopped and Madam Chen immediately said, "It was Mrs. Li. It was Dr. Li's wife who did it. That night, when I was about to feed my mother-in-law the medicine, Mrs. Li came looking for me not long after. She prepared the medicine that she brought and fed it to my mother-in-law, saying that it would cure her illness. But who knew that after my mother-in-law drank it? I was scared. I wanted to report it at that time, but... Saying this, Madam Chen stuttered, not daring to continue. "But say it, say it," Han Yunxi said angrily. Miss Chen's body trembled in fear, but she braced herself to continue. "But she gave me 500 silver coins and told me not to say anything and to report to Shun Tian Manor tomorrow. She said that she had already arranged everything, and after this, not only would I receive compensation from the Han family, I would also receive another 500 silver coins from her. I was possessed and confused. Princess Consort, my mother-in-law wasn't killed by me. It was Mrs. Li, it was her. Please spare my life. I'm begging you, Princess Consort, please spare my life. Madame Chen said this and kept kowtowing. Pang, 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 pang. But Han Yunxi didn't have a shred of sympathy for such a money grubber. Madame Li had poisoned him, but why would she do that? Dr. Li had worked in the Han family for so many years and had always been on good terms with them. The Han family had never treated him badly. Why did Dr. Li mistakenly prescribe the medicine? Why did Mrs. Li add salt to the wound? Since someone had pointed out the culprit, Madame Li would definitely speak up. The truth was getting closer and closer. Official Ouyang, shouldn't you immediately send someone to the Li family? Han Yunxi asked. Official Ouyang finally came back to his senses. Although he knew that the situation had far exceeded the Empress Dowager's expectations, he couldn't show favoritism in the main hole. He could only immediately send someone to the Li family to arrest Madame Li. However, not long after, the officials didn't bring Madame Li back. Instead, they brought back a corpse. Reporting to Princess Consort, Official Ouyang, Madame Li hanged herself in front of Dr. Li's memorial tablet. When this subordinate rushed over, she had just been taken down. What? Han Yunxi slapped the table and stood up. She's dead. The corpse was just sent to the morgue. The officials honestly replied. Han Yunxi's face turned pale. She couldn't believe it. Madame Li was the last clue. Coroner Xia, examine the corpse. Han Yunxi angrily shouted as she walked to the morgue. Coroner Xia quickly followed her. Seeing the corpse, there was no need for Coroner Xia to examine it. Han Yunxi could see it herself. She had indeed hanged herself not long ago. Han Yunxi's hands clenched into fists. She never thought that the real murderer would be killed this quickly. She had been too careless. She should have sent someone to protect Madame Li earlier. Dr. Li and Madame Li must have been threatened. Dr. Li didn't give enough medicine, so Madame Li personally went. Now that the husband and wife had gone, the clues had been cut off. There was only one last step left. This was truly hateful. Returning to the court, Miss Chen had already fainted from kowtowing. Han Yunxi didn't even spare her a glance as she stared at Official Ouyang with an unhappy expression. Official Ouyang felt uncomfortable being stared at by her. He braced himself and timidly said, Princess Consort, this case. Does the Li family still want to? Is this case being tried by your court or this princess? Why are you asking me? Continue. Han Yunxi was very fierce as she sat on the side with a gloomy face. Continue. How could they continue? Official Ouyang was going to suffer a tragedy. Chapter 188. Dr. Li and his wife both committed suicide to protect the mastermind behind the scenes, as well as to protect the safety and future of their children. Official Ouyang knew who dared to provoke the Han family and esteemed Wang Fei. The case had already reached this point, so how could he continue? He could only wrap it up. Official Ouyang lowered his eyes, inwardly depressed. How could he clean up the mess without offending the person in the palace too much and appeasing the person in front of him? Official Ouyang's head was as big as two and he didn't know what to do. Official Ouyang, continue. Han Yunxi gritted her teeth as she spoke word by word, her displeasure written all over her face. Yes, yes. Official Ouyang nodded repeatedly. He couldn't care less and had to deal with this big Buddha in front of him first. As for the person in the palace, he could only explain after meeting them. Official Ouyang immediately changed the verdict to Madame Li as the real culprit. In view of Madame Li's suicide, he didn't pursue the crime of murder. As for Madame Qin, she didn't report what she knew and was judged to be an accomplice. She could avoid the death penalty, but she couldn't escape punishment and was imprisoned for 10 years. Actually, the Han family clinic was more or less responsible for the mistake in Dr. Li's prescription. However, seeing esteemed Wang Fei's cold face that was comparable to His Highness Duke of Qin's, official Ouyang didn't dare pursue the Han family's responsibility. Therefore, the matter of the compensation was changed to the Li family being responsible for Madame Chen's mother-in-law's funeral and raising the orphan left behind by Madame Qin. After the verdict was read, 7th Madame finally let out a sigh of relief and was overjoyed. Official Ouyang timidly glanced at Han Yunxi, thinking that since the Han family had escaped unscathed, esteemed Wang Fei should be able to vent her anger. But who knew that Han Yunxi would ask coldly, "That's it?" Official Ouyang's heart skipped a beat and he almost asked back, "Then what else do you want?" They all knew that the person behind the scenes was the one in the palace. To be able to clear the Han family's name to this extent was already very difficult. They should stop while they were ahead. Of course, official Ouyang didn't have the guts to say this out loud. He stood up and respectfully said, "Princess Consort, please add on." Han Yunxi sat to the side with an expressionless face. Although she did not occupy the main seat, she emitted a powerful aura of a queen. Coldly, she said, "Madame Qin cried injustice at the entrance of Shun Tian Manor yesterday morning, ruining the reputation of our Southern City Medical Center. How can we redeem this?" Sir Ouyang's mouth twitched when he heard this. There were many ways to salvage the situation, but once he made a judgment, wouldn't that person in the palace slam the table? One had to know that old Madame Fu was already furious that they didn't manage to force the Han family to their deaths this time. Official Ouyang hesitated again and again. On one side was Qin Wang Fei, and on the other side was the Empress Dowager. It could even be the Emperor. The latter was more important. No matter what, he still had to consider the latter. So official Ouyang boldly said, "Princess Consort, you also saw Dr. Li's prescription." It was indeed a mistake. Dr. Li's Southern City Medical Center's people, the Han family, more or less has a bit of responsibility. Madame Qin isn't completely slandering you. Han Yunxi arched an eyebrow and nodded thoughtfully. Official Ouyang's words make sense. This Wang Fei is still trying to figure out why Dr. Li and Lady Li would want to poison people. The husband and wife's actions are different from one another. Perhaps this Wang Fei should pay a visit to the Li estate and ask them who they've seen recently, where they've been, and if there's anything strange about them. Official Ouyang shouldn't be in a rush to close the case and continue investigating. Han Yunxi was threatening to eat Guogua. Not to mention whether or not she could find any clues if she went to the Li family. As long as the case wasn't closed, official Ouyang would have a headache. If she really did find any clues, official Ouyang would be the first one to suffer. Official Ouyang had the heart to cry in the latrine. The person that didn't want this case to be delayed the most was him. With no other choice, official Ouyang could only make a concession. He used the name of the Supreme Court to order Shun Tian Manor to make a public announcement to clear the Southern City Medical Center's name and restore their reputation. Who would have thought that Han Yunxi would raise a second question? She said, "The Southern City Medical Center's closure is not a small loss. This princess and the Han family's 7th madam have spent a lot of time and effort on this case. Should the Supreme Court compensate us?" This, official Ouyang took in a cold breath. He had been in the Supreme Court for all these years, going from the registrar to the head of the Supreme Court. This was his first time seeing someone ask for compensation from the Supreme Court. This was the grudge between the Han family, the Li family, and Madame Qin, it was their own matter. Spending a lot of time and effort was their own matter. The Supreme Court was only presiding over the trial. Why should the Supreme Court compensate them? Official Ouyang was very angry as he seriously asked, Princess Consort, the one who framed you is Madam Qin and the one who killed you is Madam Li. What wrong did the Supreme Court do? Who would have thought that Han Yunxi would give a cold laugh and say, this case is with Shun Tian Manor, it can be cleared in a day. With this prescription, we can see the clues and find the real culprit. For such a simple case, if the Supreme Court didn't interfere, it would have been closed yesterday morning. Why would it be delayed until now? For these losses, if we don't ask the Supreme Court for compensation, who should we ask for compensation? Hearing this, official Ouyang's anger was completely extinguished and was replaced by a deep fear. He finally understood. Although the Princess Consort seemed to be targeting the Supreme Court, she was actually slapping the Empress Dowager's face. She was also demonstrating to the Empress Dowager. It had to be known that this case was handed to the Supreme Court by the Empress Dowager's order. Everyone in the Supreme Court knew about Shun Tian Manor. Although everyone knew that it was the Empress Dowager's order, in this kind of situation, official Ouyang didn't dare to mention the Empress Dowager. Once he did, wouldn't it be publicly admitting that this matter wasn't the Supreme Court's fault, but the Empress Dowager's? Official Ouyang carefully thought about it and felt a chill run down his spine. This loss could only be silently suffered by the Supreme Court. Official Ouyang, what this Princess Consort said, is right? Han Yunxi asked coldly. That's right, that's right. The Supreme Court should compensate. Official Ouyang could only admit it. Then how does official Ouyang plan to compensate? As Han Yunxi spoke, she calmly played with her delicate fingernails. She lightly blew on her fingers and casually said, the medical clinic saves people, time is precious. This Princess Consort's time is also very precious. When these words came out, everyone, including 7th Madam, looked over in disbelief. If this was reaching for a yard after taking an inch, then Han Yunxi had to admit it. She even felt that it wasn't enough. This wasn't a matter of the Southern Medical Clinic, but a conspiracy. Because of some people's selfishness, they had caused the death of 3 innocent lives. They had harmed Madam Qin and her young child, destroyed 2 families, and even almost cut off the Han family's livelihood. She wanted compensation from the Supreme Court. She wanted to use the Supreme Court to slap the Empress Dowager's face. It wasn't excessive at all. The Supreme Court didn't compensate her to her satisfaction, so she didn't mind making a fuss. When the time came, she wanted to see who would have a guilty conscience and who would lose more face. She wanted to let that person in the palace know that she, Han Yunxi, wouldn't be soft-hearted when doing things. Official Ouyang lowered his head and said in a small voice, as for how to compensate, it will all be up to the Princess Consort. Han Yunxi didn't hesitate and said in a calm tone, not much, 10,000 taels is enough. Of course, this princess wants gold. When these words came out, official Ouyang almost choked on his own breath. 10,000 taels of gold. How could the Supreme Court take out so much public money in such a short time? Han Yunxi naturally knew that the Supreme Court couldn't take out so much gold, but didn't they have the old madam behind them? She had plenty of ways to get money. Official Ouyang thinks it's too much. This Princess Consort wants to accompany His Highness Duke of Qin. If I calculate the time carefully, I really can't calculate it. Accompany His Highness Duke of Qin. When he heard these 3 words and thought of the recent rumors of Qin Wangfei being favored, official Ouyang's legs went soft. It was as if he saw His Highness Duke of Qin standing right in front of him. How could he dare to think it was too much? He braced himself and immediately agreed. Han Yunxi, this woman, really couldn't be offended. Since official Ouyang agreed, she continued to ask, then when does official Ouyang plan to pay this compensation? 100,000 taels of gold isn't a small amount. I ask that the Princess Consort be lenient for a few days. Official Ouyang quickly said. Be lenient for a few days. How many days is that? Han Yunxi just had to ask clearly. 10 days, 10 days. Official Ouyang felt like he was about to collapse. He also didn't know how to report this case to the Empress Dowager. In short, he decided to pretend that he didn't know anything. In any case, the Empress Dowager had ordered for the Supreme Court to be investigated. Everyone in the Supreme Court knew about this matter. The Supreme Court didn't have the money, so the Empress Dowager had to think of a way. After finalizing the compensation and time of payment, Han Yunxi felt much better. Although she didn't find any evidence to uncover the mastermind behind the scenes, she had still fiercely counterattacked. Since the Empress Dowager was able to silence Madame Li so quickly, she must have been paying attention to the Supreme Court's movements. At this time, her expression must be very interesting. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi's mood became much better. Only then did she leave with 7th Madam. At this time, the news of the Supreme Court situation had reached the palace. Bang! The exquisite teacup fell from the Empress Dowager's hand. She stared blankly, unable to believe what she had heard. Murong Wanru didn't dare to sit on the side. Her heart was pounding as she slowly stood up. In the silence of the room, only the Empress Dowager's breathing became heavier and heavier. Suddenly, she waved her hand and swept the tea set off the table. Trash! A group of trash. You can't even handle such a small matter. What did Ijia raise you for? Murong Wanru's face was deathly pale. She took 2 steps back, her heart beating wildly. It had to be known that this scheme was her idea. The one who had bribed Dr. Li and Madame Li was also her. She had used the Li family's eldest son's future to threaten Dr. Li to frame the Han family. That night, Dr. Li and Madame Li both went to Madame Chen's house. Outside the window, they saw that Madame Chen's mother-in-law didn't die after drinking the medicine. Madame Li steeled her heart and directly went to Madame Chen's mother-in-law's house to poison her to death. She also bribed Madame Chen. When the matter was exposed the next day, Dr. Li couldn't live with himself and chose to commit suicide. Murong Wanru thought that everything would be fine once Madame Chen's mother-in-law was poisoned to death. After her husband died, Madame Li could only endure her grief for the sake of her son and the Li family. Who would have thought that Han Yunxi would be able to see through the amount of medicine on the prescription and the actual amount of poison in one glance? It wasn't that Murong Wanru underestimated Han Yunxi, but that she simply didn't have the brain power to think that there would be such a problem with the Kuegan. It had to be known that even when Dr. Li had chosen the Kuegan, he hadn't known the relationship between the amount of Kuegan and the time of the poison's onset. This time, Han Yunxi had won again. Her victory was flawless. No one could refute the result of this case. If she continued to investigate, who knew if Han Yunxi would trace it back to her? Thinking of this and seeing the Empress Dowager's reaction, Murong Wanru couldn't help but tremble. Wasn't the trash the Empress Dowager was talking about her? Just as Murong Wanru was panicking, the Empress Dowager suddenly calmed down and slowly turned to look at her. Chapter 189. Seeing the Empress Dowager silently look over, Murong Wanru quivered and hurriedly knelt down. Your Majesty, Wanru has embarrassed you. Wanru was too careless. Please punish me, Your Majesty. The Empress Dowager coldly sized up Murong Wanru, her astute phoenix eyes full of dissatisfaction. Not only did this matter not suppress the Han family, but it also allowed Han Yunxi to fiercely counterattack. Once such a ridiculous matter spread, not only would the Supreme Court be ridiculed, but she, who had ordered the case to be brought to trial, would also be ridiculed. If it weren't for Murong Wanru's suggestion, she wouldn't have fallen into such a sullen situation. How could the Empress Dowager not resent Murong Wanru? Murong Wanru didn't dare to raise her head. Seeing that the Empress Dowager didn't speak, she was extremely flustered. The Empress Dowager was her last retreat, her last support. No matter what, she couldn't lose her again. She was about to speak, but who knew that a trace of calculation would flash through the Empress Dowager's eyes, and she spoke first. "Get up and speak." Murong Wanru was very surprised. She didn't expect the Empress Dowager to not vent her anger on her, but let her get up like this. She timidly raised her head, her face delicate and pitiful. "Your Majesty, Wanru knows she was wrong. Wanru can't get up. Han Yunxi's ability isn't something that ordinary people can compare to. You being defeated by her, alas, is also considered normal." The Empress Dowager sighed lightly. This sigh clearly flattered Han Yunxi while denying Murong Wanru. Murong Wanru was really incredulous. Han Yunxi had just shown her power to the Empress Dowager, but the Empress Dowager was still so sure of her despite her anger. What right did that woman have? Was she really that capable? She didn't admit it, and she was even more unwilling. Han Yunxi only knew how to use poison. She was just lucky. What else did she know besides poison? The Kuagan incident this time was just a coincidence. Why was the Empress Dowager so sure of her? Murong Wanru's heart was blocked, and she was very unconvinced. She said seriously, "Your Majesty, please give Wanru another chance. Wanru will definitely find her weakness." Wasn't Murong Wanru's fighting spirit exactly what the Empress Dowager wanted? Rather than fighting with Han Yunxi herself, it was better to have Murong Wanru stir up trouble. Although Murong Wanru was Grand Concubine Yi's adopted daughter, she was still a treasure in her hands. The Empress Dowager couldn't bear to see Han Yunxi and Grand Concubine Yi get along. The most troublesome, subtle, and volatile relationships in the world were those between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. No matter how capable Han Yunxi was, what could she do to Grand Concubine Yi? No matter how good Han Yunxi was, Grand Concubine Yi would still hold a grudge if she made a mistake. If she wanted to sow discord between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, the key was Murong Wanru, her sister-in-law. A chance, the Empress Dowager muttered to herself thoughtfully. Of course there is still a chance, but, as she spoke, she personally helped Murong Wanru up and had her sit on the side. Murong Wanru was very nervous. "Esteemed Empress Dowager, as long as I'm under the same roof as her, I definitely won't let her have an easy time." While the Empress Dowager was calculating in her heart, Murong Wanru had her own plans as well. Wasn't the most direct reason she'd come to rely on the Empress Dowager for marriage. Even if they were engaged, she didn't want to marry. Not long after the new year, Marquis Pingbei went to the Duke of Qin's estate to urge them to get married. If it wasn't for the Empress Dowager fanning the flames behind the scenes for a good show, how could Marquis Pingbei's estate have the guts to go so soon? Under the same roof. The shrewd Empress Dowager immediately understood Murong Wanru's meaning. She lightly took Murong Wanru's hand and patted it. "Yesterday, I told Marquis Pingbei that this marriage couldn't be rushed. After all, his son Zhang Sunche still doesn't have a single official position. He's always sloppy and idle about. If you marry him, you'll suffer grievances." Hearing this, Murong Wanru was extremely moved. She never expected the Empress Dowager to be so considerate of her. What the Empress Dowager was considering was exactly what she'd been worried about. But Grand Concubine Yi had never told her anything. Leaving aside Zhang Sunche's dissolute nature, his current situation required him to rely on his family for food and clothing. He didn't even have a way to make a living. To put it bluntly, he was just an idle person. A wife's status depended on her husband. If she married over, her status would drop, to say nothing of other things. If there was hope, it didn't matter if her status dropped temporarily. But the key point was that Marquis Pingbei's body was still very healthy. Who knew how many years it would take for Zhang Sun-che to inherit the title of Marquis? Even if she thought things through and was willing to marry over, how was she supposed to endure her days after marriage? The Empress Dowager looked at Murong Wanru with pity. Murong Wanru nodded her head repeatedly and pursed her lips in grievance. She looked like she was about to cry, but anyone who saw her would feel tender affection. But the Empress Dowager had seen many women like her in the imperial harem. Although her face was full of pity, her heart was cold. Very quickly, she changed the topic and said, It's just that delaying the wedding isn't a solution. After all, your situation is too special. Marquis Pingbei is right. If we don't hurry up with the wedding, who knows what kind of gossip will spread. When the time comes, won't you feel even more wronged? At these words, Murong Wanru's hand stiffened. Seeing the Empress Dowager's kind, willowy eyes, she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. She herself wore a mask in front of others. How could she forget that this old Empress Dowager wasn't someone easy to deal with? No matter how kind her smile was, it couldn't be trusted. The Empress Dowager's words had been so beautiful, but in reality, they were both a punishment and a warning to her. If the Han family clinic matter was settled this time, the old Empress Dowager would naturally help her delay the wedding. But now that things had gone wrong, the Empress Dowager was determined to have her marry. Murong Wanru's palms gradually grew cold, but the Empress Dowager still gently pulled her. The smile on her lips was warm and amiable. Wanru, you're a smart child. In the future, help me settle things well, and I naturally won't treat Marquis Pingbei's estate unfairly. A woman, no matter how powerful her maternal family is, if she doesn't make some contributions to her husband's family, she won't be able to stand firm in the end. Don't you think so? The Empress Dowager finally spoke clearly, and Murong Wanru's heart skipped a beat. It could be said that she had come to a realization in hindsight. Go back and prepare well. Don't refuse again. Marquis Pingbei picked a good date at the end of the month, and I think it's pretty good. As the Empress Dowager spoke, she finally let go of Murong Wanru's hands. At this time, her palms were covered in sweat. The Empress Dowager had used both kindness and coercion on her. She couldn't escape, however, after stepping into the Peace Palace, she had never thought of escaping. It was just that she couldn't accept it. All the way back to the Duke of Qin's estate, Murong Wanru's hands were still tightly clenched. If it wasn't for Han Yunxi, she wouldn't have overreached herself, much less be punished by the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager had already spoken. Even if Mu Fei delayed, she had no choice but to agree to the marriage. She simply wanted to vomit to death. All of this was caused by Han Yunxi. From the start of the Plum Blossom meet until now, all of her sufferings had been caused by Han Yunxi. It was Han Yunxi who ruined her future. The more Murong Wanru thought, the angrier she got. Her docile little face gradually twisted into a savage expression. It was at this moment that she saw Han Yunxi and Grand Concubine Yi walking through a nearby corridor. The two of them were chatting and laughing. Anyone who didn't know better might think they were mother and daughter. Murong Wanru's eyes shone with a terrifying hatred. Han Yunxi, even if I get married, you can forget about having a day of peace at the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunxi was currently chatting with Grand Concubine Yi when she suddenly felt a chill at the back of her head. She unconsciously turned to look, only to see that the courtyard behind her was completely empty. What's wrong? Grand Concubine Yi asked. Han Yunxi smoothed out her hair. Nothing. Grand Concubine Yi sat down on one side, gesturing for Han Yunxi to sit as well. She said mildly. Yunshi, Marquis Pingbei's estate has already set a date for the wedding at the end of the month. They've even sent it to the palace for the Empress Dowager to look over. I'm afraid they'll send it over within the next 2 days. Wanru, does she know? Han Yunshi asked hastily. It was impossible for her not to rejoice in her misfortune. It had long been an unwritten rule for the young men and women of the imperial clan to ask the Empress Dowager about their wedding dates. If the Empress Dowager took a liking to them, she'd prepare a grand gift for the newlyweds. If she didn't, she'd refuse them at the door. When Marquis Pingbei had come to rush the wedding, she guessed that the Empress Dowager wouldn't miss a chance to discuss Grand Concubine Yi. The languid and leisurely Grand Concubine Yi sighed again and again, extremely vexed. She still doesn't know. That girl's got a stubborn temper. I don't know how to tell her. Mufei, she'll have to marry sooner or later. It's better to get married early to avoid all the gossip. Han Yunshi could only console her like this. That Zhang Sunche might be the son of the Marquis' estate, but he doesn't even have a single official position in the court. All he does is idle about and flirtatious by nature. I was thinking of delaying the wedding for a year or so and finding a decent job for Zhang Sunche first. That way, Wanru won't be wronged. Grand Concubine Yi had considered many things, but Murong Wanru had always resented Grand Concubine Yi for agreeing to the engagement in the first place. She'd kept her distance and didn't know what Grand Concubine Yi was thinking. Seeing Grand Concubine Yi's worried face, Han Yunshi guessed that Grand Concubine Yi must have doted on Murong Wanru from the bottom of her heart and treated her as her own daughter. Otherwise, why would someone as strong and prideful as her reveal such a helpless expression? Unfortunately, Murong Wanru brought this upon herself. As Grand Concubine Yi predicted, Marquis Pingbei ordered the wedding nanny to deliver the wedding date and auspicious hour within a few days. With the Empress Dowager's approval, Grand Concubine Yi couldn't delay it even if she wanted to. Murong Wanru shut herself in her room and sulked, refusing to see anyone. Still, she didn't say that she wouldn't marry, so the wedding was set in stone. Grand Concubine Yi busied herself with preparing Murong Wanru's dowry and finding an official position for Zhang Sunche. Unfortunately, things weren't so easy with the Empress Dowager pressuring her from above. Today, Han Yunshi was about to leave the house when Grand Concubine Yi called her back. Yunshi, when the Duke of Qin comes back, have him come to my rooms. Just say there's something I need to discuss with him. Without a doubt, Zhang Sunche's future prospects would be handed over to His Highness Duke of Qin. Han Yunshi only agreed without much explanation. She didn't even know when the Duke of Qin would come back. He seemed to have been busy for half a month. Actually, Han Yunshi was busy as well. Today, she'd left the house for the justice courts. The compensation from the justice courts had already arrived, a total of 10,000 taels of gold. She'd already found shops in the west, north, and east of the city. She was planning to use the money to open 3 more charity clinics under the Han family's name. They'd provide free medical ingredients for the poor and needy. The Han family didn't have enough manpower, so the decorations of the shops, the selection of medicinal ingredients, the hiring of doctors and apprentices, as well as various publicity matters, were all waiting for her to take care of. Of course, there was still the Li family and Madame Chen's child. Han Yunshi never considered herself a good person. She even admitted that she was a petty person who always took revenge. But she still had a heart of compassion. Madame Chen and Madame Li were both in the wrong and innocent. Their families were even more innocent. In the end, Han Yunshi still allocated some money to the Li family and their child. She even said that as long as they wanted, they could come help out at the charity clinics. Words for the reader: the Duke of Qin is very busy. He'll be back soon. Chapter 190. With money, everything went smoothly. Within a few days, the Han family's medical centers in the west, north, and east of the city all opened. As a result, the Han family now had medical centers in all four directions of Tianning's capital. They were called the Four Directions Medical Center. Originally, the Southern Medical Center was half profit-making and half public service. With the compensation from the justice courts backing it up, it was now a free clinic. As long as you were a poor family, you wouldn't be charged a single coin for medical treatment. Because of this rule, Han Yunshi didn't need to advertise much. Within a few days, the Han family's Four Directions Medical Center had become the capital's headlines. Everyone in the streets and alleys was talking about it. Although there were mixed praises and criticisms, their popularity had increased in an instant. Esteemed Wang Fei, those people are too much. They actually said at the gates that even if we give them free treatment, no one would dare to come and seek treatment, little Qin Xiang complained indignantly. Let them say what they want. Han Yunshi smiled and didn't mind. If someone belittled them, then there would be others who praised them. No matter what others said, as long as their popularity increased and the four medical centers opened, the Han family of medicine wouldn't be forgotten. Little was the only heir to the Han family's medical skills. He still needed time to learn. During this time, the Han family couldn't just silently withdraw from the medical world, right? Moreover, didn't the Empress Dowager find the Han family an eyesore? She was going to make the Han family famous in the capital and restore their former prestige. After thinking it over, Han Yunshi said, Little Qin Xiang, go post a notice. In the future, this Wang Fei will personally take charge of the Southern Medical Center on the 15th of every month. You? Little Qin Xiang couldn't believe it. Can't I? Are you doubting my medical skills? Han Yunshi narrowed her eyes as she questioned. Medicine and poison came from the same family. She was proficient in both poison and medicine. Moreover, she'd read the Han family medical canon with little Her medical skills had improved quite a bit, so it was easy for her to treat some common illnesses. No. If Mistress shows up, many people will come. Little Qin Xiang was overjoyed. She could even imagine the long line outside the Southern Medical Center on the 15th. Those people who looked down on the Han family were still bullying them. Now that there was no one left, they'd let them know that Qin Wangfei was also a member of the Han family and could represent them. Looking at little Qin Xiang's happy appearance, Han Yunshi's lips curled into a happy smile. In fact, the volunteer clinic was only a small step in her plan. She thought that after she started the free clinic, she would persuade Gu Beiyue to come to the Han family clinic regularly for free clinics. If Gu Beiyue, the head of the Imperial Physician Academy, came forward, the effect would be even more different. If he came, the other imperial physicians would follow him. Although it might not cause a sensation in the city, at least no one would dare to gossip. At that time, those who rejected the Han family because of Hong Kongans' misdiagnosis would also be willing to come. In this way, the Han family's volunteer medical service would not only be a charitable act supported by the poor, but also a charitable act supported by the entire city's citizens. At that time, neither the Empress Dowager or the Emperor would be able to interfere. Moreover, not only would they not be able to interfere, they would also be praised. Later on, when the compensation money from the Supreme Court was used up, Han Yunshi would definitely apply for subsidies from the Imperial Court. The method of doing charity could not be benevolent or kind at all. It was unknown if the Empress Dowager would be fuming with anger if she knew about Han Yunshi's plan. However, when the news of the Han family's four-way clinic opening spread to the palace, the Empress Dowager was so angry that she repeatedly slammed the table and almost fainted. Originally, she wanted to revoke the Han family's medical license, but now, they opened 3 clinics in a row. Not to mention the Empress Dowager, anyone else would be so sullen that they would vomit blood. Despicable. This Han Yunshi is truly despicable. She took Aijia's money to give face to the Han family and be a good person. Aijia. Aijia wants to kill her. Bang bang bang. Bang bang bang. The Empress Dowager slammed the table with all her strength, as if the table was Han Yunshi. The servant girls in the room all knelt on the ground, and no one dared to make a sound. What day is it today? The Empress Dowager asked coldly. Only then did the old mama dare to speak up. To reply, Mistress, today is the 25th. The day after tomorrow, Miss Wanru from the Duke of Qin's estate will be getting married. Hearing this, the Empress Dowager's temper eased a little. She would endure and wait for Murong Wanru's revenge after the wedding. She had already forced Murong Wanru into a dead end. She refused to believe that Murong Wanru wouldn't fight to the death with Han Yunshi. After taking care of the Han family's four-way clinic, Han Yunshi didn't have time to rest. Murong Wanru was getting married, so as her sister-in-law, she and Grand Concubine Yi had to take care of things together. The dowry, clothes, jewelry, servant girls, and old mama were all arranged by Grand Concubine Yi. Of course, the amount of dowry Grand Concubine Yi wanted to give Murong Wanru had nothing to do with the Empress Dowager. Grand Concubine Yi didn't mention it, so the Empress Dowager tactfully didn't ask. What she helped with was the extravagance of Murong Wanru's wedding, the matters of the homecoming banquet, and the piles of congratulatory gifts that came every day. By right, His Highness Duke of Qin should be present at this time. Moreover, he should be the one to receive the guests and receive the gifts. After all, everyone was here to see the Duke of Qin and curry favor with him, making their presence known. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi still hadn't shown up. Even Grand Concubine Yi couldn't find him. Grand Concubine Yi was very busy, so Han Yunshi could only keep watch as her sister-in-law. As a result, the rumors of her being favored were confirmed. To be in charge of matters at the Duke of Qin's estate, what else could she be but favored? Finally, everything was in order. Tomorrow, Murong Wanru would get married in a grand fashion. In the dead of night, the Duke of Qin's estate was still in a festive mood. The spectacle of a daughter marrying off was no less than that of a daughter-in-law. Han Yunshi finished up the matters at hand and was so tired that she was about to collapse. She stretched lazily and was about to return to the hibiscus courtyard when Murong Wanru walked right in front of her. Han Yunshi remembered that she'd rarely seen Murong Wanru after the incident at the Plum Blossom meet. Why wasn't the bride-to-be sleeping at this time? Murong Wanru seemed to have lost quite a bit of weight. She was dressed in a light yellow muslin gown that made her look even weaker, as if a gust of wind would topple her over. Sister-in-law, it's been hard on you these past 2 days. When you first married into the family, I didn't help much. When she spoke, her reserved and well-behaved manner was still very lovable, but the words that came out of her mouth, Han Yunshi chuckled in her heart. If she remembered correctly, when she first married into the family, the enormous Duke of Qin's estate didn't even have a single red lantern. There wasn't even anyone to send congratulatory gifts. Compared to today's festive atmosphere with red lanterns hanging high in the air, it was simply the difference between heaven and earth. She had to admit that Murong Wanru's wedding, whether it was the extravagance of getting married or the bridal procession, made people envious and yearn for it. But so what? Han Yunshi smiled. What's the big deal? Sister-in-law married into the family of a higher status, while younger sister married out of a lower status. As long as younger sister is happy, it's worth it no matter how tired sister-in-law is. One married into a higher status, and the other married into a lower status. This was simply hitting Murong Wanru's sore spot. Murong Wanru was still inexperienced and it came to venomous tongues. Murong Wanru's face was deathly pale, but she quickly smiled again. She had something even more worthy of showing off. She didn't believe that Han Yunxi wouldn't mind. Sister-in-law, the Duke of Qin is back. He's currently in Lady Mother's room discussing tomorrow's matters with Lady Mother. He said he was too busy, but he still rushed back. Murong Wanru had made a special trip to find Han Yunxi for this very reason. That guy came back. Han Yunxi was surprised. Sister-in-law, the Duke of Qin doesn't like crowds. When you two got married, he couldn't even stay at home. I originally didn't expect him to come, but I didn't expect him to still find the time to rush back. I'm so happy. Murong Wanru couldn't wait to express her good mood and excitedly grabbed Han Yunxi's hand. Sister-in-law, let's go. We'll also go. Han Yunxi stared blankly and allowed Murong Wanru to drag her away. She had to admit that she couldn't refute her. It wasn't Murong Wanru who had exposed her old scars. It was that bastard Long Fei Yi who had hurt her. What was he doing here at this time? She had already finished all the things that he, as her older brother, should be busy with. What did he come back for? To attend tomorrow's wedding in a relaxed state. He didn't even attend his own wedding, but he actually took the time out of his busy schedule to attend someone else's wedding. She had thought that he wouldn't easily give others what he didn't give her. He wouldn't force himself to do what he didn't like for her, nor would he force himself to do it for others. But reality proved that she'd thought too much. He really did come back. The entire way to Grand Concubine Yi's courtyard, Han Yunxi was silent. She really wanted to be willful for once. If Long Fei Yi really did attend tomorrow's wedding, then she wouldn't show up. But after seeing Grand Concubine Yi, she told herself not to be willful or make trouble without reason. Murong Wanru was Long Fei Yi's adopted sister. They'd grown up together, so even if they weren't related by blood, they were still family. As for her, even if the rumors of her being doted on spread throughout the city, she was nothing in Long Fei Yi's heart. At most, she could be used occasionally. Sister-in-law, the Duke of Qin is in the room. I didn't lie to you, did I? Murong Wanru said in a low voice. Seeing Han Yunxi's soulless state, she finally felt smug. What's there to be pretentious about? Han Yunxi spurned herself in her heart before recovering to smile brilliantly at Murong Wanru. I didn't say you lied to me. Without a trace, she broke free of Murong Wanru's hand and strode into the room with a grin. Your Highness, as her older brother, have you prepared a present for little sister Wanru? As long as she didn't mind, no one or anything could hurt her. But Long Fei Yi only arched a brow at her and replied, I forgot. Han Yunxi didn't expect this at all and gave a start. Was Long Fei Yi really here to attend the wedding? On one side, Grand Concubine Yi knew her son's personality well. When she saw Murong Wanru enter, she hastened to smooth things over. He's busy. Wanru's already happy that he came back. Of course Murong Wanru had heard the conversation. She knew the Duke of Qin's personality and didn't mind. Smiling, she said, it's already the best present that His Highness rushed back. When Long Fei Yi came back, he wasn't planning to come. Grand Concubine Yi ran into him and dragged him here. Just then, mother and son were talking about Zhang Sunche's position in the government. As long as Long Fei Yi showed his face, it wouldn't be hard to get things done even if the Empress Dowager suppressed him. Grand Concubine Yi stopped talking when Murong Wanru arrived. She was too protective of Murong Wanru, afraid that she'd take things too hard and go down a dead end. Fei, I'll leave Mu Fei's matters to you. It's getting late, so you should all rest. Tomorrow, you have to be alert, Grand Concubine Yi smiled. Although she had no choice but to marry, she had to be happy and lively. She couldn't let that person in the palace see her as a joke, could she? As long as she helped Zhang Sunche into a high position, Wanru wouldn't suffer any losses. Her chastity had been sullied, so it was already amiable that she could recover to this extent. After being stifled for so long, Murong Wanru finally had something to comfort her. As long as she saw Long Fei Yi, her heart was filled with joy. She was about to say something when Long Fei Yi stood up and said, "Mu Fei, I Ken and Han Yunxi are going on a long trip. We'll leave tonight, so I'll have to trouble you with the matters of the estate." "What, he's leaving?" Chapter 191. Long Fei Ye's words stunned the three women present. Murong Wanru couldn't believe her ears. The Duke of Qin, he came back not to attend her wedding, but to take Han Yunxi away. No. She couldn't accept it. How could the Duke of Qin do this? Han Yunxi was caught off guard as well. She almost burst out laughing. This guy had simply come back to add to the chaos. So much for Murong Wanru showing off just then. Fine, she admitted that she'd let it go. Right now, she was willing to forgive him for being absent last time. Han Yunxi looked towards Murong Wanru, who happened to be looking back. Han Yunxi couldn't help but muffle her mouth. Anyone could tell that she was secretly laughing. Murong Wanru was flustered and exasperated. Her shame turned to anger as her bottom line finally collapsed. Her eyes turned red as she looked towards Grand Concubine Yi and threw a tantrum. "Mu Fei, look, the Duke of Qin is bullying people." After all, Murong Wanru was a white lotus, especially in front of the Duke of Qin. She'd never thrown a tantrum in her life, but this time she couldn't hold back. It was obvious how hurt she'd been. As it turned out, Long Fei Yi hated women who complained and acted coquettishly at the slightest provocation. Even if he bullied women, he wouldn't bully them so casually. Impatience flitted past his eyes. He didn't even want to spare Murong Wanru another glance. But Grand Concubine Yi couldn't take it. She'd only seen Wanru smile tonight, so how could she bear to see her upset again? "Fei, you've gone too far. Wanru's getting married tomorrow. That's a big event, so how could you be upset as her older brother? No matter how important it is, it's not as important as tomorrow. No one's allowed to leave tonight." Grand Concubine Yi ordered. "Urchin's matters are very urgent, may Mu Fei forgive me." Long Fei Ye's patience was limited. He glanced at Han Yunxi as he spoke before turning to leave. "Stop right there." Grand Concubine Yi finally lost her temper. She chased after Long Fei Yi and blocked his way. "Fei, aren't you going to listen to Mu Fei's words? What could be more important than Wanru's marriage? Why don't you tell me? Private matters. It's very urgent, so we have to leave." Long Fei Yi was a man of few words, but his tone was even tougher than Grand Concubine Yi's. "And if Mu Fei insists that you stay?" Grand Concubine Yi didn't budge an inch. "Imperial Mother, please forgive me," Long Fei Yi said and insisted on leaving. Mother and son were at loggerheads. She didn't know if this was the first time. At this time, it was usually by Lianhua who came out to be the peacemaker. However, Murong Wanru stood in place, looking at the Duke of Qin with hidden bitterness. She felt so wrong that she had no choice but to get married. Could it be that the Duke of Qin couldn't treat her better? She didn't say a word, waiting to see if Grand Concubine Yi would comfort her. Han Yunxi's eyes flashed craftily before she quickly stepped forward to take Grand Concubine Yi's hand. "Mu Fei, His Highness must have a secret order on him that can't be disobeyed. It's also inconvenient to reveal it. Otherwise, His Highness would have come back much earlier instead of now." Han Yunxi paused. Seeing that Grand Concubine Yi didn't retort immediately, she knew there was hope. Grand Concubine Yi's love for her son was well known throughout the imperial clan. Moreover, she relied on him to achieve her current power and status. Would she really make things difficult for him for the sake of an adopted daughter? Mufei, didn't little sister Wanru say just then that His Highness rushing back was already the best present? She's already very happy. I'm sure little sister Wanru will understand the Duke of Qin, Han Yunshi coaxed again. Of course Grand Concubine Yi knew and understood all of this, but she didn't want to compromise this time. Wanru's marriage was too unjust. The Duke of Qin couldn't ignore her any longer. If the Duke of Qin attended the wedding, it would at least tell the world that Wanru was valued despite being an adopted daughter. She had someone to rely on and wasn't easy to bully. No matter what, Han Yunshi was surprised by Grand Concubine Yi's stubbornness. She thought the woman was just being impulsive and needed a way to step down, but never expected her to really compete with her own son for the sake of an adopted daughter. Han Yunshi didn't have time to think about the strangeness of the situation. She quickly gripped Grand Concubine Yi's hand and lowered her voice. Mufei, don't forget that Zhang Sun Che still has to rely on the Duke of Qin. That's the most important thing. Her reminder finally calmed Grand Concubine Yi down. A complicated look flitted past her eyes. She understood the Duke of Qin's temper best. If he was pushed to a corner, he wouldn't even stay behind. Even Zhang Sun Che's affairs would be out of the question. The wedding was only temporary, but Zhang Sun Che's future prospects would affect Wanru's entire life. Mufei, the Duke of Qin and I will go and come back quickly. Just let us go, Han Yunshi continued to lay out the stairs. Although Grand Concubine Yi was in a difficult position, she had no choice but to step aside and say, go quickly and come back quickly. Try to make it back in time for the banquet in 3 days. Many thanks to Mufei. Han Yunshi rejoiced as she winked at Long Fei Yi with a smile. Long Fei Yi didn't say much, but turned to leave. Han Yunshi quickly chased after him while Grand Concubine Yi sighed helplessly. As soon as she turned around, she saw Murong Wanru sobbing soundlessly behind her. Wanru, Grand Concubine Yi's heart clenched. She was about to explain when Murong Wanru stomped her foot and turned to run away. An adopted daughter was an adopted daughter. Today, she finally saw clearly that no matter how good Grand Concubine Yi was to her and treated her like her own daughter, she was still an adopted daughter in the end. Han Yunshi had married into the family while she was married out. In the end, she'd become an outsider. Grand Concubine Yi, you can't even satisfy such a small wish of mine. What right do you have to say that I'm your own daughter every day? If you're heartless to me, then don't blame me for being unjust to you. Han Yunshi had already followed Long Fei Yi out the back door of the Duke of Qin's estate, but she was still smiling. She still couldn't believe that Long Fei Yi had chosen to take her away at a time like this. Murong Wanru really reaped what she'd sown. If she'd known her place from the start, how could she have ended up like this? Rather than blame the heavens and accuse others, it was better to reflect on herself. Long Fei Yi suddenly stopped. What are you smiling about? Han Yunshi recovered her senses and coughed lightly. It's nothing. Do you know what your lordship wants to take you to do? Long Fei Yi asked next. Fine. She'd only wanted to leave and was overjoyed. She hadn't thought of this question. Where to? What to do? But she didn't need to think too much about it. This guy wouldn't visit a temple without a cause. What else could he want from her? Detoxification, of course. Han Yunshi said mildly. But Long Fei Yi only said, poison. Poison. You want to harm someone? Han Yunshi's face was full of astonishment. Kill someone. Long Fei Yi was expressionless as he mounted his horse and extended a hand towards Han Yunshi. What's going on? Han Yunshi looked at him suspiciously, not moving. You still owe me a favor. Take care of this and we'll be even, Long Fei said. At this time, Han Yunxi finally noticed that something was wrong with this guy. The usually calm him seemed to be a bit impatient today. Last time, when she'd begged him to take her to Medicine City, she had indeed owed him a favor. It was just that last time, he'd asked her who wanted to be even with her. This time, he wanted to be even with her. Han Yunxi pursed her lips and stretched her hand out. If he didn't say anything, she couldn't be bothered to ask. As soon as she mounted the horse, he wrapped his arm around her waist. It was so natural that she didn't pay much attention to it. It was as if she was used to it. Poison, actually, it was as simple as detoxification for her. However, reality proved that this was purely Han Yunxi's wishful thinking. After a night of galloping, Long Fei actually brought Han Yunxi to an abandoned courtyard in the wilderness. If it was someone else who brought her here, Han Yunxi would definitely suspect that she was being kidnapped and sold. However, it was Long Fei. Fine, she was overthinking it. As soon as she entered the room, she saw an extremely good-looking back. Han Yunxi never thought that a man's back could be so good-looking. It was as if the phrase, back view killer, was created just for him. His figure was tall, thin, and handsome. His clothes were whiter than snow, and his ink-black hair was casually tied up with a white jade hairpin. It was like an ink painting frozen in a desolate courtyard. One black and one white, it formed a world of its own. Tangli, did you bring everything? Long Fei's cold voice broke the silence of this ink-painting world. Only then did the man named Tangli turn around and look at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi was shocked once again. That was an otherworldly face. Although it wasn't as handsome as Long Fei, it had the same cold aura as Long Fei. However, Long Fei's coldness was cold, solemn, and cruel. On the other hand, his coldness was a kind of purity that made people only dare to look at him from afar. Tangli lightly flicked his sleeve on the stone table, and rows of golden needles appeared out of thin air. Han Yunxi frowned and looked over. She saw that these golden needles were of different thicknesses, lengths, and shapes. They were definitely not medical needles, nor were they embroidery needles. Without a doubt, these were hidden weapons. This guy's surname was Tang. Could it be that he was from the Tang sect? And these hidden weapons were the legendary Tang sect's hidden weapons? The Tang sect was neither righteous nor evil. They didn't interact with people from the righteous sects, but they also disdained to associate with those from the evil sections. They had always been alone and stood aloof from worldly affairs. However, the world coveted the Tang sect for no other reason than the power of the Tang sect's hidden weapons. Han Yunxi was shocked. However, Long Fei casually took a few golden needles and threw them away after a glance. He said with disdain, "These will take a long time to learn. Do you have any ready-made ones that can be used?" "No." Tangli was very straightforward. "What about the pear blossom storm needles?" Long Fei asked. As soon as he said this, Han Yunxi immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Even if she didn't have common sense, she still knew what the pear blossom storm needles were. This was the second hidden weapon of the Tang sect. It was said that there were only 2 of them in existence. Oh my god! What was Long Fei trying to do? Tangli suddenly frowned. His celestial-like cold expression immediately changed. Impossible. Long Fei unceremoniously stretched out his hand. "I'm temporarily borrowing it. Give it to me." Tangli gritted his teeth and angrily asked, "That thing is gone once it's used. How do I borrow it?" There were a total of 27 golden needles hidden in the pear blossom storm needles. They could be fired one by one or multiple at the same time. As long as one learned the technique, they would be able to use it. Because of the special design, the strength and speed of each golden needle fired was very shocking. The strength was enough to pierce through stone. As for the speed, there were very few experts in the world who could dodge it. However, if one of these things was fired, it would be gone forever. Seeing Tang Li's angry and boorish appearance, Han Yunxi was a little stunned. Basically, the truth would be revealed as soon as he turned around. And when this guy opened his mouth, it was also the truth. He wasn't some otherworldly celestial man. He was just a little better looking. It's not like I'll use them all up. Long Fei Yi didn't think much of it. These words made Tang Li even angrier. Long Fei Yi, if you want to deal with that group of people, I can go with you. Why bring a burden along? Burden? Was he talking about her? At this moment, Han Yunxi's last remaining good impression of Tang Li instantly disappeared. You really couldn't judge a book by its cover, especially a man. Chapter 192. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi and Tang Li, the corners of her mouth twitching. She was full of doubts. She only knew that Long Fei Yi wanted to take her to poison someone. As for the specific situation, she didn't know anything. However, judging from the situation, it was probably not easy. The two men confronted each other. Long Fei Yi's domineering and strong aura was obviously stronger. You're going with her. Cut the crap and hand over the thing. Otherwise, this prince will immediately send you back to the Tang sect. Long Fei Yi gave an ultimatum. You! Tang Li was furious. He had escaped from the marriage with great difficulty. He would never go back even if he was beaten to death. Long Fei Yi's hand was already in front of him. Tang Li could only compromise in the end. Long Fei Yi, you better make sure that this woman can poison those people to death. Otherwise, there won't be a next time. As he spoke, he reluctantly placed a palm-sized, diamond-shaped black iron tool in Long Fei Yi's hand. Was this the legendary pear-flower storm needles? Han Yunxi immediately came over to take a look. Her eyes were as bright as a searchlight. Long Fei Yi looked at it thoughtfully. Just as he was about to activate the mechanism, Tang Li hurriedly stopped him. Please, don't waste it, okay? Once the mechanism was activated, a golden needle would be wasted. One had to know that there were only 27 golden needles in a single pear-flower storm needles. It could only kill 27 experts. Only God knew what kind of heavenly treasure Long Fei Yi would be interested in. No matter how nervous Tang Li was, he didn't care. Of course, he didn't really activate the mechanism. He just gestured and taught Han Yunxi how to use it. A good concealed weapon was not only good for strength and speed, but also for ease of use. After Long Fei Yi gave a simple explanation, Han Yunxi immediately understood. The 27 golden needles corresponded to 27 small mechanisms. As long as it was lightly pressed, the golden needles would immediately fly out and explode the opponent. Han Yunxi sighed inwardly. This thing was almost comparable to modern handguns. Do you understand? Long Fei Yi was quite patient. Han Yunxi nodded and took the pear-flower storm needles. Who knew that she would almost drop it as soon as she got it? This thing didn't look big, but she didn't expect it to be so heavy. Seeing this, Tang Li sneered disdainfully. Long Fei Yi, is the woman you like? Like? Long Fei's face was expressionless. It wasn't clear whether he heard her or not. Han Yunxi narrowly avoided choking on her own saliva. There were so many meanings behind those words, so what did Tang Li mean? Aren't you a little too weak? Tang Li grinned. This guy was like a banished immortal when he didn't speak. Once he opened his mouth, he really made people dislike him. This was the first time they met. She really didn't know how she had offended him. Han Yunxi was angry. She held the pear-flower storm needles in one hand and her wrist in the other. Her index finger was on the mechanism. She narrowed her eyes and aimed at Tangli in a very professional way. She said coldly, "You can try if I'm weak or not." Tangli was shocked and immediately ran away. In the world, except for his father, no one knew the power of the pear-flower storm needles better than him. If he was careless, he would lose his life. Han Yunxi put away the pear-flower storm needles and blew on the needle coolly. She looked at him coldly. How can a grown man be so easily frightened? So weak. Seeing Han Yunxi's carefree and handsome appearance, Tangli couldn't help but be a little stunned. For a moment, he forgot to refute. He only felt that the pear-flower storm needles seemed to belong to Han Yunxi. The way she held the needles was very pleasing to the eye. Well, since Long Fei Yi took her, he would believe her this time. Long Fei Yi also saw Han Yunxi's posture just now. A touch of satisfaction flashed across his face. There was a fierce battle coming up. Since it was a fierce battle, it was also a test. He hoped that this woman would continue to satisfy him. Long Fei Yi and Tangli were about to leave, but Han Yunxi stopped them. Wait. She pointed at the various golden needles on the stone table and asked curiously, "Are these also hidden weapons?" "Of course," Tangli answered coldly. "Don't you want them?" Han Yunxi asked again. Tangli smiled coldly and didn't bother to answer. Compared to the pear-flower storm needles, these golden needles on the stone table should all be thrown away. There was no comparison at all. Long Fei Yi asked him to provide hidden weapons for Han Yunxi, so he just casually grabbed some. Who knew that he couldn't get away with it? "If you don't want them, then give them to me. By the way, teach me how to use them. I learn very quickly." Although the pear-flower storm needles were good, they were useless once used. God knows how many years and money it would take to make a second one. But these golden needles were obviously mass-produced. Last time when she was besieged by the black-clothed killers in the medicinal herbs forest, Han Yunxi deeply realized how weak her poisoning ability was. Learning how to use hidden weapons was a good way. These golden needles were very small. If she applied poison on the golden needles and used hidden weapons to poison people, as long as she practiced diligently, she would be able to do it easily. Han Yunxi had a favor to ask of him, so she smiled very flatteringly. Tangli still had a lingering fear after being threatened, so he wouldn't give Han Yunxi any face. He raised his eyebrows and looked at her, then said coldly, "This young master still wants these things. Don't touch them." Stingy scum, this guy was the man who couldn't be judged by his appearance the most. Han Yunxi immediately threw away the golden needles in her hand. She didn't want them. Who knew that Long Fei Yi, who was about to leave, would turn back and personally pick up a few golden needles and throw them to Han Yunxi, "Keep them well. If you can go back this time, this prince will personally teach you. Go back." Han Yunxi was stunned. Did he have to make it sound so serious? "Your Highness, who exactly are you taking me to poison?" Han Yunxi asked seriously. "You'll know when we get there." Long Fei Yi turned around and left after saying that. Along the way, they passed through mountains and ridges, speeding along like an arrow leaving a bow. Han Yunxi only knew that this young master Tangli, who couldn't be judged by his appearance, was the young master of the mysterious Tang sect. He had escaped from the Tang sect because he was dissatisfied with the marriage arranged by his father, and the Tang sect had issued an arrest warrant for him. She didn't know anything else. She had already asked Long Fei Yi twice, but he still didn't say anything. Han Yunxi naturally felt uneasy. He wanted her to poison him, and then he gave her the pear blossom rain needles. Who knew how terrifying the person she wanted to kill was? With this in mind, Han Yunxi secretly trained her hand strength. Along the way, she held the pear blossom rain needles in the air with one hand. Gradually, she got the hang of it. A few days later, they arrived at a mountain stronghold not far from Medicine City. The night was dark and the wind was strong. 3 figures flashed through the main gate of the mountain stronghold like ghosts and lay in ambush under a fence on the side. This mountain stronghold wasn't big, but there were many people. They were all dressed in black with their faces covered. Even the guards at the gate exuded a thick murderous aura. Finally, Han Yunshi couldn't remain calm and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, what exactly do you want to do? Can you tell me now? There's a poison master in the innermost room. She's the only one left alive." Long Feiyi finally opened his golden mouth. So? Han Yunshi still didn't understand. There are at least 100 black-clothed assassins lying in ambush in this courtyard. Leave them to Tang Li. There are 10 experts lying in ambush in that loft. They're all poison men. I'll leave them all to you. Long Feiyi said. Poison men. Han Yunshi was too surprised. The first time she saw poison men was when she was kidnapped at the Celestial Fragrance Tea House. At that time, Madame Li and He Sha were both poison men. She had later told Long Feiyi about this matter. Madame Li and He Sha must have been raised by the Sanfrewa Duke. Poison men were people who were immune to most poisons. It wasn't easy to raise even one such person. She didn't expect that there would be 10 of them here. Moreover, what Han Yunshi didn't expect was that Long Feiyi actually wanted her to deal with 10 highly skilled poison men all by herself. No wonder he would give her such a high-grade concealed weapon like the Pearflower Storm Needles. Han Yunshi's mouth twitched. Then what are you going to do? Who knew that the moment she said that, Long Feiyi suddenly grabbed her and flew up into the air. Han Yunshi wasn't prepared at all. Both her hands instinctively hugged Long Feiyi. Once this commotion was made, the black-clothed assassins in the courtyard immediately flew over. Han Yunshi only felt a gust of wind and a white figure flashed past. Tang Li had made his move. Tang Li's speed was so fast that it was inhuman. Moreover, compared to his flying speed, his killing speed was even faster. Only God knew what kind of concealed weapon he used. One by one, the black-clothed assassins fell down, but they didn't know how they died. Han Yunshi once again felt that you couldn't judge a book by its cover and had a whole new level of respect for Tang Li. Of course, Han Yunshi didn't have the chance to take a second look. In just a moment, Long Feiyi had successfully brought her past the black-clothed assassins and landed on the balcony of the loft. The moment Long Feiyi let go, Han Yunshi also instinctively let go of his waist. But the moment she let go, she regretted it. Long Feiyi had said earlier that there were 10 poison men in the loft. Han Yunshi had not let go of his hand and was about to hug him again when Long Feiyi immediately retreated, leaving only a sentence, "Don't disappoint this prince." As his voice fell, he also disappeared. Pay! Han Yunshi was furious. What did Long Feiyi mean by that? Although the poison men all knew how to use poison, they couldn't possibly be as powerful as that Duke Kong. 10 poison men, Long Feiyi should still be able to handle them. Why did he want her to deal with them alone? Even if she had to poison the poison men to death, he would still have to help her, right? Long Feiyi, you're the one who will disappoint this princess consort, all right. Just as Han Yunshi was feeling indignant, the detoxification system suddenly alerted her that there was poison rapidly approaching her from behind. Han Yunshi whipped her head around to look and actually saw that a black-clothed female assassin had appeared behind her at some point in time, holding a long sword in her hand and was rapidly stabbing towards her. If it wasn't for the poison on the sword, Han Yunshi thought that she would definitely not even know how she died. She immediately dodged to the side and the long sword pierced through empty air beside her before sweeping towards her. Han Yunxi crouched down to dodge again, and the sharp blade of the sword swept past the top of her head, brushing off a few strands of her hair, almost injuring her. In the blink of an eye, Han Yunxi flipped over and rolled a few times on the ground, barely managing to pull some distance away from the black-clothed female assassin as she leaned against the wall, panting heavily. That was so scary. Han Yunxi heaved a sigh of relief, but the black-clothed female assassin did not stop. The sword continued to draw closer and closer, and Han Yunxi had nowhere to run. Just at this critical moment, she finally remembered that she had a weapon in her hands. This time, she did not dodge. Although she was terrified, she still braced herself and faced the piercing sword head-on. With lightning speed, she pulled out the pear blossom storm needles and pulled the trigger, shooting out a gold needle. Xiao! The black-clothed female assassin had never thought that Han Yunxi would have this kind of weapon and use this kind of move. The gold needle pierced her heart, and she stood there in a daze as blood dripped from her lips. Very quickly, she fell to the ground. Seeing this, Han Yunxi spat out a mouthful of foul air. Just as she was about to stand up, who knew that a black figure would suddenly appear out of thin air and land in front of her. There were a total of 9 people, and they were all black-clothed female assassins. All 9 of them came together. Han Yunxi only felt her scalp turn numb as she cursed Long Fei Yi in her heart 1,000 times. However, she was very clear that since Long Fei Yi had left her here, she could only rely on herself if she wanted to live. Chapter 193. 9 female assassins in black stood in a semicircle and surrounded Han Yunxi at the foot of the wall. Long Fei Yi, who was hiding in the shadows, looked at them with a complicated look in his eyes. He still had urgent matters to attend to and had to go to the attic immediately. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to call Tang Li over for help. But when he saw Han Yunxi was surrounded and he couldn't even see her figure, he stopped. Would this woman be able to pass this test? Why was there no sound at all? He thought that she would scream for help and call for him and Tang Li to save her. But everything was so quiet. Don't tell him that she fainted like she did in the medicinal herbs forest. However, Long Fei Yi didn't see that Han Yunxi, who was surrounded at the foot of the wall, was holding the pear flower storm needles in a very professional way with a calm face. When she was practicing medicine to save people, she was also so calm and meticulous. But now, she was not saving people, but killing people. Han Yunxi told herself very firmly that she was not killing people, but saving herself. She must save herself. Even though she was completely surrounded and seemed to be in a hopeless situation, she was very clear that this position was only beneficial to her. Her back was against the stone wall, which could completely guarantee her safety. In other words, she had no worries and could wholeheartedly deal with the danger in front of her. The only thing she could use was the pear flower storm needles. But there were 9 masters in front of her, so it was a competition of speed. Was her hand faster, or the sword of the female assassins in black? The 9 female assassins in black were all holding long swords. They could take her life in one move. But it was obvious that the things in Han Yunxi's hands made these women afraid. They didn't act immediately and were all vigilant. The leader of the female assassins in black asked coldly, "Pear flower storm needles, are you from the Tang sect? You know it's the pear flower storm needles, yet you still dare to come." Han Yunxi was not to be outdone. Although she was sitting on the ground, her momentum was not inferior to the 9 people who were standing. The black-clothed female assassin sneered disdainfully, but she didn't move for a long time. However, Han Yunxi's detoxification system had already sent out an alarm. Poison had appeared. It was ecstasy poison. There was ecstasy poison in the air, and its concentration was increasing. The poison humans were immune so naturally they were not afraid. The 9 of them stood and looked at Han Yunxi with disdain. Petty tricks. Han Yunxi sneers in her heart. She has been holding her breath for a long time. The female killer in black wants to play poison with her. It's just what she wants. Soon, Han Yunxi pretended to be poisoned. She frowned slightly and fainted. Seeing this, the leader of the assassins in black snorted in disdain, "You dare to come here? Why don't you find out where this place is?" The other 8 people immediately let down their guard, and the female assassin and the lead personally walked towards Han Yunxi. Looking at the pear-flower storm needles in her hand, her eyes revealed a greedy gleam. Obtaining this treasure, his lord would definitely reward her handsomely. The moment the leader walked forward, Long Fei Yi, who was behind her, immediately saw Han Yunxi's condition. Seeing that she was unconscious, Long Fei Yi was about to make a move. But seeing that her hand was still holding the pear-flower storm needles in a suave posture, Long Fei Yi then realized, and his lips suddenly curled into a relaxed smile. He had long forgotten about his own urgent matters. The leader of the assassins in black approached step by step. Han Yunxi silently counted her steps as she curled up at the foot of the wall with her head lowered. Her eyes were slightly narrowed, like a cheetah waiting for an opportunity to strike. Very soon, the female assassin in black approached. She bent down and stretched out her hand. This was the moment. Han Yunxi suddenly opened her eyes and aimed the pear-flower storm needles at the female assassin's heart. Without hesitation, she shot out a needle. The female assassin was caught off guard and died with one needle, directly falling towards Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi swiftly pulled the female assassin's corpse with one hand to use as a cover, while the other held the pear-flower storm needles and aimed at the 8 female assassins in front of her, sweeping them from left to right. Following the movement of the pear-flower storm needles, she continuously pulled the trigger. The golden needles were not simply shot out. No, to be exact, they were shot out. They all accurately entered the heart of the black-clothed female assassin. What was the pear-flower storm needles? It was Tang's sex number 2 treasure. Its speed was fast and its strength was ruthless. Even an expert would not be able to escape. The remaining 8 female assassins did not expect that Han Yunxi was not poisoned, and even more so, that their leader would die like this. Facing the sudden pear-flower storm needles, they did not even have time to regain their senses. One by one, they fell down one by one, all of them with a needle in their hearts, dying on the spot. Everyone had fallen and Long Fei Ye's line of sight was no longer obstructed. He saw Han Yunxi still sitting in her original position, fiercely pushing away the corpse of the female assassin leader. That dainty little face was a little pale, but it was cold and threatening. Her gaze was sharp and there was a kind of indescribable beauty of ruthlessness. Actually, giving her such a terrifying weapon like the pear-flower storm needles, Long Fei Yi should have been assured long ago. With such a powerful weapon, if she still could not survive, then there was no point in keeping her, wasn't there? But he had still watched from the beginning to the end. However, he had to admit that although she had the help of the pear-flower storm needles, but the speed in which Han Yunxi blew up these 10 poison men had far exceeded his expectations. She was straightforward and did not lose out to any expert skill. Han Yunxi did not know that Long Fei Yi was watching her from the side. After taking care of the 10 poison men, she had taken the antidote and was finally able to breathe again, and the taut string in her mind was finally able to relax. The loft was guarded by these 10 poison men, and with them gone, the loft would be safe. As for the hundreds of black-robed assassins outside, they would all be handed over to Tang Li. Although it was still a chaotic battle, but Tang Li could guarantee that he would not allow any of the assassins to take even half a step closer to the loft. Han Yunxi was very safe. She stepped over the corpses that littered the ground and leaned against the railing, admiring the fight in the courtyard with great interest. To be exact, the chaotic battle in the courtyard was not a fight. With Han Yunxi's intelligence, she very quickly saw through Tang Li's routine. This fellow only had two abilities, one was to dodge the opponent's attacks, and the other was to use hidden weapons to kill the opponent. And it was just these two abilities that Tang Li had performed brilliantly, his figure dodging as fast as lightning, and all the hidden weapons that he had used, Han Yunxi could not see them clearly at all. She could only see that all the corpses that had fallen had all been hit in their vital areas by the hidden weapons. The more Han Yunxi watched, the more serious she became, and the more engrossed she became. She thought, if she could also learn Tang Li's ability to smear lethal poison on the hidden weapons, even if it did not hit any vital areas, she would still be able to kill people in the blink of an eye. With that thought in mind, Han Yunxi suddenly realized that she was also a potentially dangerous person, and she couldn't help but feel happy. Long Fei Yi, who was standing at the side, had not left yet. He raised an eyebrow as he watched, and the more he watched, the more satisfied he became. Very good, this woman could actually still wear a smile on her face in this kind of situation, and watch leisurely from the sidelines. She was indeed courageous. She was calm and collected in the face of trouble, courageous and resourceful, able to advance and retreat, and also had superb poison skills. It would be a waste to keep her by his side and not use her. Long Fei Yi looked at Han Yunxi, and Han Yunxi looked at Tang Li. Time passed just like that, and not long after, Tang Li had taken care of nearly 100 black-clothed assassins. The entire mountain stronghold was covered in corpses, and it was a complete mess. Tang Li, dressed in a spotless white robe, stood among the corpses. His handsome face was silent, and his eyes were cold and aloof. Suddenly, there was a feeling of desolation between heaven and earth. Han Yunxi only felt that this fellow had suddenly become otherworldly again. Alright, that was just an illusion. Tang Li flew upstairs, and glanced at the poison men all over the floor. With one glance, he could tell that these people had all died from the pear blossom storm needles, and all of them had died from a single needle. Although the pear blossom storm needles were powerful, Han Yunxi had never used it before. For her to be able to produce such a level of power on her first try, she had to admit that Long Fei Yi had good taste. A hint of appreciation flashed past Tang Li's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He opened his mouth and said, "Where are the pear blossom storm needles? Hand it over." His tone made it sound as if she would pocket it for herself. Han Yunxi handed over the pear blossom storm needles without hesitation. She didn't care for it. Tang Li even fussed over it, and after confirming that it was not damaged and that only 9 golden needles were missing from the needle holes, he kept it. Han Yunxi watched, and the corner of her mouth twitched. She said in a low voice, "Hey, this white robe that surpasses snow doesn't suit you, really." "What?" Tang Li did not hear clearly. "Nothing." Han Yunxi chuckled. Tang Li did not pursue the matter, and asked casually, "Where's Long Fei Yi?" Han Yunxi did not know where Long Fei Yi had gone. That despicable guy had left her here and left, and there was no sign of him till now. He didn't come out. Tang Li was very surprised. He came out. Is he in the loft? Han Yunxi was also surprised. She glanced inside and saw that there was no one in sight. That's right, she remembered. Long Fei Yi had said that there was a poison master in the loft, and he wanted her alive. Could something have happened to her? Tang Li was shocked. Long Fei Yi had come back to exterminate this mountain stronghold, this time precisely because of the female poison master in the loft. Because he was afraid that there would be a delay and something would go wrong, he had asked for his help. Otherwise, even if there were poison humans around, Long Fei Yi would still be able to handle it all alone. Now that the entire mountain stronghold had been exterminated, he still had not returned. At this moment, Long Fei Yi, who had been hiding at the side, finally walked out. He glanced at Tang Li and Han Yunxi, and with an expressionless face, he walked towards the loft. Han Yunxi was completely confused. She still did not know what this guy was doing here, and Tang Li chased after him in disbelief. Long Fei Yi, you. Where did you go just now? Long Fei Ye's eyes were filled with a trace of irritation. He did not answer, but quickened his steps. He should have come in earlier, but he had unknowingly dragged it out for so long. By the time Long Fei Yi reached the center of the loft, it was already too late. He saw a woman committing suicide in the loft, her wrist dripping with blood, no longer breathing. Han Yunxi saw the table full of poisons and knew that this woman was the poison master that Long Fei Yi had wanted to keep alive. Unfortunately, she was dead. Tang Li stared at Long Fei Yi as if he was staring at a monster. He had never thought that this guy would fail. What on earth had he gone off to do just now? It must be known that he had lost a large number of spies to find out about the situation in this mountain stronghold. This was the territory of Northern Li's Duke of Kang. This female poison master was weak, but she was an expert in concocting poisons. She was the Duke of Kang's right-hand woman, which was why the Duke of Kang had deployed so many men to protect her. Back then, the Northern Li spy had used a poison that was very similar to the perplexing butterfly illusion, called bone fragrance, and it had been concocted by this female poison master. To be more precise, Long Fei Yi had come for the bone fragrance, but now, she was dead, and he could not get anything out of her. He had wasted his time. Where did you go just now? Tang Li asked suspiciously. The Duke of Kang's subordinates were all very hot-tempered. If they knew that they could not escape, most of them would commit suicide to silence them. Long Fei Yi knew this, but he still came so late. It's urgent. Long Fei Yi did not explain much, as if nothing had happened. He casually threw a small blue and white porcelain bottle to Han Yunxi, and said calmly, "You can try to figure out the poison inside." Seeing the blue and white porcelain bottle, Tang Li was shocked. He was about to speak, but Long Fei Yi gave him a look that intimidated him. Chapter 194. Inside the little blue and white porcelain bottle was perplexing butterfly illusion. This was a poison related to Long Fei Ye's origins and his entire life. It contained a world-shaking secret. Tang Li knew that Long Fei Yi had brought Han Yunxi this time to see if she was worth nurturing and keeping for his own use. Han Yunxi's performance was indeed worthy of recognition, but he never expected Long Fei Yi to toss such an important item to Han Yunxi to figure out. After all, no one else had ever seen such a thing besides him and Chu Shifeng. Chu Shifeng had warned him multiple times before that Han Yunxi was a mysterious woman. She was completely different from the useless trash of the Han family, and full of suspicions. Moreover, her birth mother was a woman of unknown origins who had connections with the medical academy. In other words, this woman wasn't simple, nor was she safe. Tang Li wanted to stop him, but was stopped by Long Fei Ye's sharp glare. Moreover, Han Yunxi was present, so he couldn't say too much. He could only shut his mouth resentfully. Han Yunxi was puzzled as soon as she received the little blue and white porcelain bottle. Normally, she'd know as soon as it came close to poison. But she'd opened the bottle and sniffed it multiple times without finding any trace of poison. One had to know that even though she didn't know what kind of poison it was in the forbidden poison pool of the medicinal herb forest, at least it was difficult for her to detect that it was poisonous. However, facing the transparent liquid in this small porcelain bottle, she actually didn't detect it at all. Strange. Is this really poison? Han Yunxi looked doubtfully at Long Fei Yi and asked, "What's this thing called? Where did it come from?" Tang Li immediately looked over vigilantly at these words, but Long Fei Yi was very calm. "Once you've figured it out, just tell your lordship." In other words, she didn't need to know that much. What do you want to know? Han Yunqi asked next. Poison, poison formula, antidote, and how long has this bottle of poison been stored? Long Fei Yi said seriously. A complicated look flashed across Han Yunqi's eyes. She asked again, how are you so sure that this thing is poison? Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi took out a little bit of the venom and dripped it on the female poison master's corpse. From the spot where the venom dripped on, the skin, flesh, and bones started to corrode. Just like that, the corpse disappeared into thin air, not even leaving behind a trace. It only turned into a wisp of green smoke that emitted a strange fragrance. Soon, the green smoke dissipated, and so did the fragrance. Han Yunqi took a few steps back as she watched the horrifying scene unfold before her eyes. She felt a chill run down her spine. This thing was 100 times scarier than modern highly concentrated sulfuric acid. Poison, this was definitely the most terrifying poison she had ever seen. At this moment, Long Fei Yi took out another bottle of venom and got Tang Li to find a corpse to poison. Han Yunqi didn't say a word as she watched silently. She saw that where the venom touched the corpse, the clothes, skin, and flesh were instantly corroded into powder, leaving only the eerie white bones. The bones also emitted a faint fragrance, but it was different from the green smoke earlier. This is the poison concocted by this female poison master. It's called. Before Long Fei Yi could finish his sentence, Han Yunqi could roughly guess what he meant. She interrupted him, this is called bone fragrance. It can corrode a person's skin, flesh, and hair, leaving only the bones. This kind of poison is very cruel and not commonly seen. But compared to the poison in your porcelain bottle, although it looks similar, it's actually completely different. After witnessing Han Yunqi's professional standards, Long Fei Yi wasn't curious. His deep eyes flashed with a hint of relief. He thought that this female poison master's death today wasn't in vain. Since it was a completely different poison, he wouldn't be able to get much valuable information out of her. Handing the perplexing butterfly illusion to Han Yunqi seemed like a good choice. However, Tang Li raised his eyebrows and sized up Han Yunqi. Are you sure it's different? Can't it corrode things? Tang Li had long heard of Han Yunqi's poison skills, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. Han Yunqi didn't answer him. Instead, she took out a few small bottles of venom from the medical bag she carried with her and dripped them on the corpse. As she dripped them, she introduced them. This is specially used to corrode hair. This is specially used to corrode skin. This is specially used to corrode bones. By the time she finished speaking, the corpse had already been tormented beyond recognition. With a serious expression, Han Yunqi took out another bottle of poison. Bone fragrance, I have it too. As she spoke, she poured it on the corpse. Sure enough, the situation just now happened. Han Yunqi lined up the poison bottles on the table and pointed at the various signs of poisoning on the corpse. She introduced the effects of the poison, the formula, the color, and the smell in detail as if she was very familiar with them. Long Fei Yi listened attentively, but Tang Li was already dumbfounded. Such a scene, let alone a woman, even a grown man like him would find it terrifying. However, Han Yunqi was actually focused, serious. There was a magical power that made people unable to take their eyes off her. Tang Li had always looked down on women. Now, he finally knew how much he had underestimated this woman. He also finally understood that this woman wasn't someone he could offend casually. Just think about it. A woman who could casually take out several bottles of deadly poison and turn a living person into slag in an instant. How terrifying was she? These poisons are all corrosive, but they all leave behind powder, even hair. Moreover, the toxicity doesn't spread. Wherever the poison is applied, it will only corrode that area. However, this bottle of yours didn't leave a single trace. A drop of it has extremely strong expansion and directly destroyed a corpse. The effects of the poison are actually completely different. With different effects, the formula will definitely be different. Therefore, the two can't be compared. Long Feiyi listened while nodding thoughtfully. Han Yunshi hesitated for a moment but still frankly told him the truth. Your Highness, if you didn't say it, I really wouldn't have noticed that this thing was poisonous. I know nothing about it. If you're in a hurry to get an answer, I can't do it. This was the first time Han Yunshi had encountered a completely unknown poison. She especially wanted to stay and study it carefully. However, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. She could tell that this thing wasn't simple for Long Feiyi, so she had to make things clear. Unexpectedly, Long Feiyi suddenly smiled faintly. Haha, I'll leave it with you. This duke isn't in a hurry. Han Yunshi was a little surprised. It wasn't because of Long Feiyi's words, but because of his smile. If she didn't remember wrongly, this should be the first time she saw such a genuine smile from him. The most she had seen before was a sneer at the corner of his mouth. 1,000-year-old black ice, melting in an instant, spring returning to the earth, all living things recovering. Was it this beautiful, this gentle? So, this big ice mountain also knew how to smile. When they were leaving, they saw the poison men's corpses at the door. Han Yunshi asked Long Feiyi if these people were the subordinates of Northern Li's Duke of Kong. Long Feiyi nodded. This person is too dangerous. What is he trying to do? Han Yunshi asked seriously. Poison cultivation was divided into poison men, poison corpses, and poison goo. Although poison men were the lowest level of cultivation, to be able to cultivate so many of them was not a simple matter. Han Yunshi couldn't even cultivate one now because she had the medicine in her hands, but she didn't know how to cultivate poison. Han Yunshi had a faint feeling of unease. Northern Li's Duke of Kong was plotting something extremely big. Han Yunshi's worries were also what Long Feiyi was thinking. Turning back to look at the mountain stronghold that was littered with corpses, Long Feiyi raised his sword and left a mark on the door that symbolized his identity. He said coldly, "This time, this duke doesn't believe that we can't force him out." This place was very close to Medicine City and could be considered the Duke of Kang's base of operations there. Moreover, that female poison master was the Duke of Kang's right-hand woman. Long Feiyi had used a single night to slaughter the entire stronghold. He didn't believe that the Duke of Kong would be able to hold himself back and not retaliate. Daring to plant a spy in Tianning and having designs on the woman under his name, Jun Xia, this Duke of Kong will make you regret your actions. When she saw the bloodthirsty smile on Long Feiyi's lips, Han Yunshi couldn't help but shiver. When she thought back to that bright smile, she thought that she must have seen wrongly. This fellow's coldness came from his bones. Where did his gentleness come from? Tang Li followed them all the way to the outskirts of the capital city. Han Yunshi could clearly feel that this fellow didn't treat her with as much disdain as before. At the very least, he didn't make any sarcastic remarks. Tang Li didn't plan on entering the city, but before he left, he actually tossed a bag of things to Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi quickly caught it and felt that it was quite heavy. When she opened it up, she saw that it was a large pile of gold needles. There were many different designs and materials, and they were all of the highest quality. They were much better than the ones Tang Li had tossed onto the stone table. For me. Han Yunshi was very surprised. Your use of the pear blossom rain needles isn't bad. You didn't lose this gentleman's face. This is a reward for you, Tang Li said arrogantly. Although he was arrogant, he was still praising her. The Tang clan's hidden weapons weren't something that just anyone could get their hands on. Even if they were of the same design, the Tang clan's weapons were much more refined and easy to use. Han Yunxi didn't hold back at all. Thank you. If you put poison on the hidden weapons, it can make up for the lack of accuracy. For a short period of time, you can at least protect yourself, Tang Li added. This point happened to coincide with Han Yunxi's thoughts. She was happy and casually invited him, stay in the city for a few days. While you're at it, teach me how to use these things. As soon as these words came out, Long Fei Yi, who was sitting behind her, immediately lowered his head and frowned. Han Yunxi, on the other hand, was slow to realize this and had a happy expression on her face. Tang Li was astonished. Long Fei Yi had said that if Han Yunxi could come back alive, he would teach her how to use needles. It was rare that the high and mighty Duke of Qin would personally teach her. This was something that many women in the world dreamed of. Han Yunxi, aren't you a little too forgetful? When he saw Long Fei Yi's icy face again, Tang Li couldn't help but shiver. He immediately turned his horse around and waved his hand before leaving. He thought that Chu Shifeng's suspicions had a bit of truth. Long Fei Yi really did take a fancy to this woman. Han Yunxi only felt baffled when Tang Li left without answering. She put away her bag of needles and realized that Long Fei Yi hadn't spoken for a long time. That's right, this guy said he'd teach me how to use these needles. Han Yunxi subconsciously turned to look, only to see Long Fei's deep, sea-like eyes staring coldly at her. Your Highness. Han Yunxi felt like she had to explain herself, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word, but raised his head to look ahead. He didn't change his carriage, but rode his horse straight into the city. It was currently afternoon, the busiest time in the city. The tall steeds were very attractive to begin with, but the man and woman on their backs were also very handsome. The woman's beauty was enough to topple cities, and her magnificently elegant demeanor. All of a sudden, they attracted a crowd of onlookers. Those who didn't know them all gasped in surprise. They were a match made in heaven, while those who recognized them were stunned. The rumors were true. Han Yunxi really was favored. She was even riding the same horse as the Duke of Qin. Heavens, does this mean His Highness Duke of Qin is officially acknowledging this esteemed Wang Fei?